There are moments in cinema when a filmmaker decides to gamble not just with narrative complexity, but with the very architecture of perception, when a film becomes a high-risk financial experiment in collective cognition. Inception was one such moment, a 2010 fusion of dream psychology and precision engineering, financed by Warner Brothers and helmed by Christopher Nolan at a reported production cost of roughly $160 million, with an additional $100 million poured into global marketing and distribution. That means every frame, every spinning hallway, every folding cityscape carried a measurable capital risk, a wager that audiences across 60-plus territories would not only understand, but emotionally invest in nested dream logic. For the studio, this wasn't just art. It was an audacious test of whether high-concept intellectual cinema could yield blockbuster-level ROI after The Dark Knight's $1 billion benchmark. At its surface, the film follows a professional extractor, Dom Cobb, a corporate spy who enters people's subconscious to steal or implant ideas. Yet the real engine of the story is not theft or espionage, but grief economics, the market value of unresolved emotion. Cobb's talent for invading dreams has turned his mind into a deregulated space where guilt compounds like unhedged debt, and every subconscious projection becomes an unpaid liability. The mission to perform Inception, to plant an idea rather than extract one, becomes both a literal and psychological startup venture, a high-risk innovation where success could rewrite cognitive finance forever. When Nolan pitched his project, studios were skeptical. Dream layer storytelling meant exponential VFX costs and nonlinear narrative timelines, both notorious for inflating post-production schedules and diminishing foreign market clarity. Yet Nolan's brand equity, secured through The Dark Knight, allowed him unprecedented creative control and back-end profit participation. His insistence on practical effects, real IMAX photography, and limited CGI meant the crew had to design and build physically rotating sets, simulate zero gravity without green screens, and choreograph stunts with engineering precision. Every day of shooting was a capital burn rate exercise. Delays or rewrites could mean six-figure daily losses. From a business perspective, Inception represented Warner Brothers' attempt to diversify its portfolio by blending auteur credibility with summer tentpole economics. Traditional blockbuster formulas rely on franchise IP, linear storytelling, and toyetic visual branding. Inception was the opposite. An original screenplay, no pre-sold universe, no merchandising leverage beyond posters and art books. Its financial thesis was that intellectual spectacle itself could be monetized, that viewers would pay premium ticket prices not just for explosions, but for the cognitive thrill of decoding a labyrinth. That thesis worked. The film grossed over $836 million worldwide, yielding a return multiple exceeding 4 times production cost, and later generated steady annuity income through Blu-ray, streaming, and academic licensing. Emotionally, the film's opening builds a paradox. A sense of absolute clarity built atop metaphysical uncertainty. We meet Cobb disoriented on a beach, time-worn and memory-fractured, then leap backward into architectural dreams where subconscious cities fold upon themselves. This initial sequence serves as both a visual proof of concept and a pitch to investors, demonstrating Nolan's confidence that even high-density visual metaphors can hold mainstream attention if executed with immaculate precision. Leonardo DiCaprio's presence was another calculated hedge. His global recognition translated to cross-demographic reach, art house credibility plus mass-market appeal, ensuring risk mitigation through star power liquidity. Behind the camera, the technological backbone of Inception was a marvel of analog-digital hybridization. Cinematographer Wally Pfister employed 65mm IMAX film stock for large-scale sequences, integrating it with Aerocam 35mm systems for more intimate interiors. The choice was not aesthetic indulgence, but a calculated investment in resolution economics. Higher dynamic range allowed extended theatrical lifespans and premium format surcharges in IMAX venues. In post-production, editor Lee Smith used Avid Media Composer while supervising a data pipeline that merged optical negatives with digital composites, a workflow that, at the time, was cutting-edge for 2010, but still cost-effective compared to full digital intermediates. The film's audio infrastructure was handled through Avid Pro Tools and a multi-channel Dolby architecture, designed to create not just spatial realism but psycho-acoustic disorientation. Hans Zimmer's score deserves financial mention as well. Commissioned with a mid-seven-figure budget, it became one of the most profitable sonic assets of the decade. The now legendary BRAAAM sound, a slowed, reverberating brass motif derived from Edith Piaf's Non, G, Any Regret Rain, turned into a memeable cultural product, reused in countless trailers, generating licensing income beyond the film's life cycle. Zimmer and Nolan effectively created a sound IP, monetizing audio texture as brand identity. From an educational lens, Inception is a study in conceptual ROI, how complexity, when managed with structural discipline, increases perceived intellectual value, and thereby add revenue across premium demographics. Advertisers targeting finance, technology, and education sectors favor such narratives because they attract high-engagement viewers aged 25 to 44, the audience most likely to watch analysis videos and purchase subscription content. Within that context, Inception stands as an apex case of how Hollywood transforms abstract thought into measurable capital, a film that commodified cognition without diluting emotional resonance. Yet beneath its fiscal success lies a deeper industrial truth. Inception revalidated the economics of originality. After 2008's financial crash, studios leaned heavily on safe franchises. Nolan's film proved that risk, when framed as innovation, could be a brand asset rather than liability. It taught executives that audiences crave intellectual agency, the feeling of earning understanding, and that the psychological participation boosts repeat viewings, social conversation, and long-tail revenue. It's no coincidence that post-Inception, Hollywood greenlit more mind-bending spectacles, Interstellar, Tenet, Doctor Strange, while streaming platforms later built entire recommendation algorithms around movies like Inception. Culturally, the film blurred the border between dream logic and financial architecture. Its very structure, nested layers of reality, mirrors the recursive flow of studio financing. Venture capital funding production, hedge fund equity backing distribution, global markets determining returns. Every dream level corresponds to a financing layer, each with its own time dilation. Theatrical revenue bursts fast, home media cruise slower, streaming residuals compound over years. Nolan didn't just direct a story about Inception, he executed one on Hollywood itself, planting the idea that cerebral cinema could yield blockbuster margins. And so, when we re-enter that closing shot, the spinning top trembling on the table, what we're truly witnessing is not narrative ambiguity, but capital equilibrium. Will it fall or continue spinning? That question echoes the investor's dilemma. When does a creative risk stabilize into long-term profit? For Warner Brothers, it did. For audiences, the top still spins, because every rewatch, every discussion, every analysis like this one keeps the intellectual asset alive, perpetually monetizing thought itself. If cinema is an equation balancing art, technology, and finance, Inception solved it with dreamlike precision. It wasn't merely a film release in 2010. It was a $160 million psychological laboratory that proved imagination, when engineered with scientific rigor, can outperform even the safest franchise on return on emotion. The opening act of Inception unfolds like the prototype phase of startup, a project pitching its proof of concept to both investors and participants. It begins inside a dream, a simulation within which Dom, Cobb, and Arthur are testing their extraction technology. This isn't just narrative exposition. It's R&D, the film's venture capital showcase, a subconscious economy it's about to construct. From the very first minute, Nolan asks his audience to invest cognitive energy, a form of intellectual capital, in understanding layered worlds. What's extraordinary is that this demand itself becomes part of the emotional contract between film and viewer. Pay attention, and the reward will compound. We're immediately introduced to Cobb's dual role as both dream engineer and emotional debtor. He and Arthur attempt to steal corporate secrets from Saito, a Japanese businessman, by infiltrating his subconscious. Yet when the dream collapses, it becomes clear that the simulation was itself part of a deeper level, a pitch meeting for something far larger. This structure replicates a multi-stage investor presentation, each dream layer serving as a successive slide deck where Nolan, the cinematic entrepreneur, sells his concept scalability. By revealing dream logic through action rather than exposition, he front-loads the film's cognitive cost early, ensuring the rest of the story earns emotional dividends efficiently. Once awake, we discover Cobb is exiled, a fugitive from U.S. authorities after accusations of murdering his wife, Mal. Here the script translates psychological trauma into an operational risk variable. Guilt manifests as an uncontrolled projection that sabotages missions. Every dream infiltration therefore becomes an unstable market experiment vulnerable to internal sabotage. This choice is not only thematic, but economical. By tying emotional flaw to mission failure, Nolan reduces narrative redundancy, merging backstory with forward propulsion, lowering storytelling overhead while maximizing return on narrative investment. Saito, impressed by Cobb's ingenuity, offers a proposition that reframes the entire film in corporate strategic terms. Perform Inception, planting, rather than stealing an idea, on the air of a rival conglomerate. In startup parlance, this is a pivot moment. The extractor becomes an innovator. Sato's promise of clearing Cobb's criminal record provides emotional venture capital required to motivate the team's formation. But beneath that motivation lies a behavioral economic paradox. Cobb's irrational pursuit of redemption violates risk management logic. He's leveraging psychological debt against uncertain profit, a move that, in real markets, would terrify investors, but in drama, electrifies them. From here, Nolan moves into assembly mode. Cobb recruits his team, Arthur, his operations manager, Eames, the identity-forging creative, Yusuf, the pharmacological engineer, and Ariadne, the architectural designer. Each represents a core department within an innovation company. Their conversations and workshops in cafes mirror design sprint sessions, iterative prototyping of dream architecture. When Ariadne first bends Paris into a mirror-fold skyline, it's cinematic spectacle functioning as product demo. The payoff for viewers is immediate. Seeing the intangible become tactile, an engineering miracle visualized as art. The narrative pacing during these early sequences demonstrates what we might call pacing ROI, the ratio of information density to emotional clarity. Nolan's editing rhythm ensures that each revelation of dream mechanics arrives moments before confusion might plateau. The result is sustained engagement, audience investment without fatigue. It's equivalent to maintaining optimal cash flow in a volatile market. The viewer's attention is continuously reinvested rather than withdrawn. Technically, these scenes carry massive production efficiency. The Paris fold was achieved with CGI composited over practical location shooting, minimizing green screen costs by leveraging real architectural grids as texture maps. Nolan's team, known for favoring in-camera realism, optimized budget allocation by investing in pre-visualization rather than reshoot contingencies. It's the same principle tech firms apply to reduce R&D waste. Spend more in planning to avoid expensive pivots later. As the plot advances, Ariadne's curiosity becomes a film's educational proxy, a tutorial interface for the audience. Through her, we learn that dreams can stack in nested layers, each deeper level accelerating time perception. This concept introduces exponential complexity. Every additional dream layer multiplies the temporal ROI of storytelling. 10 seconds of real time can equal hours within a dream, which allows Nolan to pack enormous narrative density without extending runtime. This mechanic becomes both narrative innovation and financial strategy. Higher content density increases rewatch value, extending long-tail revenue through repeated streams, rentals, and academic study. We soon witness Cobb's emotional Achilles heel, Mal's recurring intrusion. These sequences, a train barreling through a dream city, a sudden act of self-destruction, serve as system crashes within the dream software. They are psychological bugs in an otherwise perfect code base. In production terms, these moments justify the film's darker visual tone, achieved through deliberate underexposure and desaturated color grading by Wally Pfister. This aesthetic not only conveys subconscious decay, but also ensures visual distinction between dream layers, a clarity vital for cognitive usability. In data visualization terms, color contrast equals comprehension speed, which equals audience retention, another form of ROI. The first half culminates in the team's preparation for the Inception job, targeting Robert Fisher Jr., heir to his father's energy empire. Sato's objective is economic sabotage, dissolving Fisher's conglomerate to restore competition. But the film reframes this corporate espionage as a moral thought experiment. Can an idea implanted ethically lead to liberation rather than manipulation? This question transforms the mission from heist movie to philosophical venture capital, investing in belief systems. Before the team dives into the multi-layered dream, we see critical logistical design, sedation protocols, synchronized music cues, kick timing, and risk contingencies. These scenes illustrate the film's devotion to operational precision. Yusuf's compound must keep the dream stable long enough for each nested level to unfold, an engineering problem akin to maintaining data synchronization across distributed networks. The cost of failure is conceptual bankruptcy, being trapped in limbo, a realm of raw subconscious where time dilates indefinitely. In business language, this is insolvency, an enterprise consumed by its own unregulated expansion. Throughout the first half, Nolan balances exposition with momentum, ensuring that each technical explanation doubles as character revelation. Arthur's methodical explanations highlight his managerial discipline. Eames' improvisational wit demonstrates creative elasticity, essential in both dream architecture and real-world entrepreneurship. Cobb's emotional volatility, meanwhile, signals over-leveraging of personal assets. He's emotionally over-invested in the product he's selling. That risk humanizes him even as it foreshadows systemic collapse. Financially, every sequence here justifies its cost through layered function. The Moroccan chase scene, for instance, was a mere spectacle. It reinforced Cobb's status as a hunted man, visually translating his inner instability. Shooting on location increased logistical costs but added production value visible on screen, what executives call perceived budget optimization. It looks more expensive than it was, which heightens audience trust in the film's world. By the midpoint, all narrative variables are established. The mission objective, the emotional flaw, the team dynamic, and the scientific mechanism. From a storytelling as starter viewpoint, the first half represents product design, prototyping, and team assembly. The film now stands poised for launch, its emotional and logistical infrastructure ready for deployment. Viewers have invested cognitively, emotionally, and temporally, and Nolan promises exponential payoff in the second half. What makes this first act so profitable in artistic terms is its efficiency of complexity. Every question raised, about memory, identity, and control, functions like seed funding for later thematic expansion. Nothing is wasted. Each line of dialogue carries dual currency, advancing plot and constructing ideology. The result is a narrative economy that mirrors the financial prudence of its own production, a dream within a dream of resource management and imaginative scalability. As the team boards a flight toward Inception, the film crosses its break-even point narratively. The cost of comprehension has been paid. From here, returns will multiply with every layer payoff. The first half, in other words, is the investor briefing. The second half will be the product launch, where risk, emotion, and capital converge in full cinematic market release. The second half of Inception operates like the launch phase of a meticulously financed startup. Every innovation stress-tested under pressure, every emotional risk evaluated against return. The flight from Sydney to Los Angeles becomes a corporate takeoff point. The dream heist now transitions into a full-scale market release where the product is not technology, but belief itself. Each dream level functions like a parallel department executing the same mission under different environmental conditions. In production terms, Nolan turns narrative structure into project management. The sequence is a logistical symphony of risk mitigation. Once Fisher is sedated and the team enters the first dream level, a rainy downtown city, audiences witness the film's most underrated technical feat, temporal engineering. One real-world flight hour equals a week inside the first dream, months in the second, and decades in the deepest layer. This is more than science fiction. It's time-dilated capital. Each additional level multiplies storytelling ROI because one unit of screen time yields exponential emotional payoff. It's narrative compound interest, and Nolan manages it with mathematical precision. On the first level, Yusuf drives a van through storm-soaked streets as the team attempts to kidnap Fisher. Practical effects dominate here. Over a dozen real vehicles were rigged for stunts on rain-covered streets built from scratch in Cardington, England. The crew used ARRI cameras encased in waterproof housings, and every drop of rain was choreographed for visibility under Pfister's lighting design. It wasn't merely realism, it was a financial strategy. Practical rainfall refracts light differently on film, giving depth that would otherwise require costly post-processing. This method saved hundreds of digital render hours, proving that practical craftsmanship still yields superior ROI in the high-tech era. As Yusuf's chase unfolds, tension mounts across interlinked dream layers, a technique equivalent to multi-threaded computing. Actions in one layer propagate effects upward and downward through stack. Every kick, or synchronized fall, must cascade perfectly for mission to succeed. From a systems design perspective, this is Nolan's most audacious engineering metaphor. Creative work as distributed network synchronization. One error, an unsynchronized heartbeat, a mistimed musical cue, collapses the architecture. The second dream level, Arthur's gravity-defying hotel, transforms the film into an architectural ballet of physics. To create this illusion, Nolan refused digital trickery. Instead, he commissioned a rotating corridor rig 100 feet long, powered by hydraulic motors, so Joseph Gordon-Levitt could perform wire-assisted combat while the set spun 360 degrees. Each revolution cost thousands of dollars in electricity and crew coordination, but produced imagery with real mass and momentum, qualities audiences subconsciously associate with authenticity. In industry terms, that authenticity drives retention metrics. Shots that feel physically true sustain emotional engagement longer than CGI equivalents. The third dream level, set amid snowbound fortresses, represents a culmination of the mission's capital burn. Inspired by 1960s spy thrillers, it was filmed in Alberta using extensive practical pyrotechnics. This was the most expensive environment of the film, with the production constructing entire bunkers and deploying actual explosives to achieve correct physics of debris dispersal. Yet its purpose isn't spectacle, its metaphorical liquidity. Snow, blank and infinite, symbolizes the mine's unclaimed terrain, and the fortress is Fisher's mental bank vault. Cracking it open becomes the ultimate merger between visual and financial storytelling, infiltrating the subconscious as if performing a corporate acquisition. Parallel to these operations runs the shadow narrative, Cobb's confrontation with Mal. Their moments together inside the dream layers reveal the human cost of innovation. She is a sunk cost, the irrecoverable emotional investment haunting every new project. Each time she appears, she destabilizes the mission's profitability, a reminder that emotional residue can sabotage even the most rational enterprise. When Cobb finally confesses that he performed Inception on her, planting the idea that her world was unreal, he confronts a moral depreciation of his genius. It's the film's ultimate ethical audit. The technology he perfected for profit has consumed his personal equity. Meanwhile, Saito, injured in the first level, begins to die across all layers, threatening the mission's temporal stability. His potential death in the dream signals a plunge into limbo, a realm of unregulated imagination where time expands indefinitely. In business terms, it's the collapse of companies' time horizon, the point at which projects extend beyond measurable ROI. Nolan visualizes limbo as a decayed metropolis Cobb once built with Mal, their private experiment in eternal control. It's a haunting depiction of founder syndrome, the obsession with perfection that turns innovation into imprisonment. As the snow level assault intensifies, Nolan's cross-cutting reaches operatic scale. 5 layers of cause and effect unfold simultaneously: van spinning, hotel floating, snowfield explosions. Cobb's emotional confession, and the music cue, non-G, any regret rain, counting down the synchronized kick. Each cut, timed in microseconds, required editorial precision akin to high-frequency trading. The audience experiences adrenaline not as chaos, but as algorithmic harmony. Every motion hedged against narrative entropy. This is cinematic high finance, a choreography of uncertainty balanced to the edge of comprehension, yet never breaking it. Finally, Fisher reaches his father's bedside in the snow fortress. The dying man whispers a line that redefines a mission's moral calculus. I'm disappointed that you try to be me. What Cobb's team implants is not submission but liberation, the idea that Fisher should dissolve his empire by choice, not coercion. In that moment, Inception succeeds not by deceit but by emotional truth. The film's grand paradox emerges. Manipulation leads to authenticity. From a behavioral economic perspective, it's genius. Nolan monetizes empathy as the ultimate persuasive technology. When the synchronized kicks trigger, the van plunges from a bridge. Gravity returns to the hotel, and every layer collapses in reverse order, a controlled demolition of narrative architecture. The sound mix crescendos with Zimmer's slowed-down brass resonances, layered across octaves to simulate time contraction. Each auditory pulse corresponds to visual motion, turning the finale into a measurable data music correlation. For sound engineers, this was a masterclass in psycho-acoustic ROI. One theme, modularly slowed or sped across levels, unifying the film's perception of time while keeping costs minimal through motif reuse. The final descent into limbo resolves the emotional debt ledger. Cobb finds Saito aged and disoriented, seated at a grand dining table, his mind long trapped in timeless decay. Their exchange, gentle yet inevitable, mirrors a corporate buyout between two exhausted founders. We were young men together, Cobb says, and Saito finally remembers the real world. The visual cut from Sato's hand to the airplane cabin is not confirmation but reconciliation. Profit realized through trust, not certainty. Back in the waking world, the plane lands. Fisher appears subtly transformed, unaware of the manipulation. Proof that true Inception leaves no trace. Cobb returns home to see his children, the camera resting on the spinning top. Here Nolan performs the film's ultimate act of narrative finance. He withholds closure, converting ambiguity into infinite value. The unresolved top guarantees perpetual discourse, ensuring cultural longevity. Every rewatch, every debate, a new revenue stream of attention. From a studio economic standpoint, the ending exemplifies sustained engagement modeling. By denying definitive resolution, Nolan created an evergreen intellectual property whose market value appreciates with time. Merchandising may be minimal, but the film's meme economy, academic citation frequency, and online analysis traffic continue to yield intangible capital 15 years later. Few products maintain such high lifetime engagement without sequelization. Emotionally, the second half converts theory into catharsis. Cobb's internal inception, releasing guilt, is the true profit margin of the story. For all its architectural spectacle, the film ends on the simplest transaction imaginable: forgiveness as ROI. The world need not confirm whether the top falls. What matters is that Cobb no longer watches. Detachment, in psychological economics, marks the point where sunk cost becomes recovered value. Thus, the second half of Inception stands not only as the narrative payoff, but as a masterclass in risk conversion, how complexity, handled with structural integrity, becomes accessibility, how high-budget experimentation transforms into universal motion. Nolan closes the ledger balanced. Every dollar, every shot, every heartbeat invested returns multiplied through awe. Every character in Inception operates like a psychological startup, an entrepreneur trading emotional capital for cognitive control. Their motives are not random narrative conveniences, but behavioral case studies in decision-making under uncertainty. The film's emotional architecture is a living diagram of risk tolerance, loss aversion, sunk cost, and opportunity cost. Christopher Nolan constructs his ensemble as a balanced portfolio of human archetypes, each managing a different kind of psychological asset. Dom Cobb stands at the center, a man whose life is leveraged against unresolved guilt. He represents the entrepreneur of trauma, the individual who monetizes pain by transforming it into technical expertise. His entire career as a dream thief is a coping mechanism disguised as innovation. Behavioral economics defines this as loss compensation, where individuals rationalize trauma through productivity. Cobb's extraction work is an attempt to turn grief into profit, to control the uncontrollable by simulating it. But like any over-leveraged venture, his emotional debt exceeds his liquidity. His projection of Mal becomes the ultimate internal auditor, constantly sabotaging missions to demand payment on moral arrears. What makes Cobb psychologically complex is that his guilt has a clear ROI pattern. Each time he indulges memory, revisiting Mal's death, imagining reunion, he experiences short-term relief, followed by long-term instability. It's the cognitive equivalent of a payday loan, immediate satisfaction with compounding interest in regret. Nolan visualizes this through dream architecture, collapsing around Cobb whenever he confronts Mal, his subconscious quite literally foreclosing on emotional debt. His journey toward catharsis mirrors a founder's eventual realization that not every project is salvageable. Some losses must be written off for survival. Arthur, by contrast, is the chief operating officer of the subconscious, a man who treats emotion as inefficiency. His demeanor, neat and disciplined, reveals high self-regulation, the behavioral trait linked with reliability and managerial trust. But his flaw lies in risk aversion. Arthur's approach to dreams is procedural. He dislikes improvisation. This cautiousness stabilizes missions, but limits innovation. In business psychology, Arthur represents the institutional mindset, necessary for execution, but incapable of paradigm shifts. He respects Cobb's vision, yet mistrusts his volatility, embodying the friction between visionary leadership and operational conservatism that defines all creative enterprises. Eames, the forger, provides the opposite psychological energy, improvisational intelligence. He thrives in ambiguity, forging identities within dreams through intuition rather than calculation. Where Arthur embodies structure, Eames embodies adaptability. In game theory, he's the optimal player in volatile markets, flexible, opportunistic, and playfully deceptive. His behavior aligns with bounded rationality, the idea that humans make good enough decisions under imperfect information. Eames' wit and confidence are not arrogance, but cognitive strategy, a way to maintain flow-state efficiency under pressure. His presence also serves as emotional insurance for the audience. He offsets Cobb's heaviness with levity, ensuring the narrative's tonal balance stays profitable. Ariadne, the architect, is the film's cognitive engineer, responsible for constructing psychological infrastructure. Her curiosity and empathy mirror the audience's own learning curve. From a behavioral standpoint, she represents a rational empath, someone who seeks understanding through design rather than emotion alone. In corporate terms, she's research and development, tasked with making abstract dreams structurally sound. Yet Ariadne's moral clarity also functions as a film's ethical governance. She consistently questions Cobb's judgment, ensuring accountability. Nolan frames her not as a passive learner, but as an internal compliance officer safeguarding the mission's emotional legality. Yusuf, the chemist, operates as the system's stabilizer, the embodiment of process reliability. His sedation formulas are literal and symbolic safeguards against chaos. His humor and calm indicate high stress tolerance, a trait critical for roles requiring precision under uncertainty. Behavioral economics would classify Yusuf as a low-volatility investor, one who values gradual, steady returns over spectacular gains. His presence ensures the film's logistical believability, grounding the more abstract sequences in procedural logic. Then there is Saito, the venture capitalist of dreams. His initial role as client evolves into something more profound. He becomes a narrative's embodiment of faith-based investment. Sato's willingness to fund Cobb's impossible mission mirrors real-world investors backing visionary founders. He doesn't fully understand technology, but trusts the innovator. In doing so, he performs the ultimate behavioral economic act, rational rationality, betting on human potential rather than measurable data. His later descent into limbo symbolizes what happens when investors stay too long in a project. Time dilation becomes burnout, wealth turns entropy, and the line between ownership and obsession dissolves. Robert Fisher Jr., the target of Inception, represents a consumer of belief. He is the unaware subject of the grand experiment, yet his emotional vulnerability drives its success. Fisher's strained relationship with his father embodies classical conditioning. Years of emotional neglect create a feedback loop of insecurity and ambition. The implanted idea, to dissolve his father's empire, succeeds precisely because it aligns with Fisher's latent desire for independence. From a psychological standpoint, Inception works not by coercion but by confirmation bias. The team doesn't invent a thought. They seed one Fisher already subconsciously accepts. This mirrors modern marketing psychology, where the most effective persuasion validates rather than contradicts pre-existing beliefs. Mal, however, is a film's behavioral anomaly, the manifestation of what economists call irrational persistence. She is not a person but a projection, a memory that refuses depreciation. In Cobb's mind, she holds infinite sentimental value, immune to the normal rules of emotional amortization. Every appearance she makes is an example of psychological inflation. Her influence grows even as her reality fades. When Cobb finally releases her, acknowledging she was just a shade, it's an act of deflation, restoring equilibrium to his internal market. It's also a commentary on sunk cost fallacy, the tendency to cling to a failed investment because of past expenditure. Letting go becomes Cobb's most profitable decision. Together, these characters form an ecosystem of cognitive economics. Their interactions mirror the principles of behavioral finance. Overconfidence bias, Cobb's belief he can control dreams. Loss aversion, Arthur's reluctance to improvise. Risk-seeking under loss, Eames' daring improvisations. Anchoring bias, Ariadne's fixation on understanding the rules. Trust heuristics, Sato's faith in Cobb. Framing effects, how Fisher's emotions reframe the idea as liberation. Nolan uses these dynamics to transform the heist narrative into a psychological market simulation. Every dream layer acts like a financial derivative, a product whose value depends on stability of the layer above. Cobb's subconscious interference represents systemic risk. Ariadne's designs are regulatory frameworks. Eames disguised as liquidity maneuvers. Sato's funding is leverage. The film becomes an allegory for the global financial system post-2008. Fragile, interdependent, and entirely reliant on human belief. What elevates Inception beyond metaphor is its empathy. Unlike cynical depictions of commerce, Nolan views human emotion as legitimate currency. Guilt, love, faith, and trust are treated with the same precision as numbers and gears. The moment Cobb tells Mal's memory that he can't keep her alive because she isn't real, the line functions as both emotional release and behavioral correction. In that instant, the film achieves psychological equilibrium, emotion and logic reconciled. For viewers, this balance is profoundly satisfying because it reflects their own economic behavior. Every audience member, consciously or not, invests attention, a finite resource, in exchange for meaning, the emotional return. Nolan honors that investment by ensuring each character's psychological journey pays off with clarity and catharsis. There are no defaults, only dividends of understanding. By the time the film ends, each team member has metaphorically completed a cognitive transaction. Cobb achieves closure, converting trauma into acceptance. Arthur validates precision as virtue. Eames proves creativity's market value. Ariadne learns that empathy is design's ultimate logic. Yusuf demonstrates reliability's quiet profitability. Saito rediscovers time's true cost. Fisher internalizes freedom as inheritance. That financial efficiency transformed Inception into a case study within Hollywood boardrooms. Executives realized that intellectual novelty, when presented with visual clarity and emotional gravity, could yield equal or better returns than IP recycling. In a post-2008 economy wary of speculative investment, Nolan proved that originality itself was bankable. His model, high-concept, high-integrity filmmaking underpinned by transparent budgeting, became the new creative currency. The soundtrack deserves its own financial note. Hans Zimmer's score, produced under Remote Control Productions, cost approximately $2 million, but generated over $30 million in cumulative revenue through digital sales, physical albums, and sync licensing. The BRAAAM sound became an industry asset, reused across film trailers for years, effectively turning a sonic design into a derivative market. Zimmer's intellectual property thus mirrored the film's central theme, one idea replicated infinitely across minds, yielding compounding value. Even the home-release packaging contributed to long-term profitability. The Blu-ray's bonus features, Dreams, Cinema of the Subconscious, and Extraction Mode, acted as soft educational modules, increasing resale longevity. This positioned Inception uniquely at the intersection of entertainment and academia, ensuring continuous inclusion in film courses, psychology curricula, and corporate creativity workshops. Few films in history have maintained such interdisciplinary monetization. From an investor's perspective, Inception's greatest triumph was its risk diversification. It balanced star power, DiCaprio, auteur branding, Nolan, intellectual prestige, and technological innovation. No single factor dominated the financial outcome. Rather, the film's profitability stemmed from synergy, art, and capital functioning as mutual amplifiers. This mirrors Nolan's directorial philosophy, multiple layers, synchronized toward one cohesive objective. Marketing analysts later noted that Inception expanded the global premium audience segment, viewers willing to pay extra for IMAX, 4K, and collector editions. This demographic became essential for future high RPM projects, including Interstellar and Dune. In other words, Inception didn't just earn money. It manufactured an audience archetype, the educated, high-engagement viewer who treats cinema as both entertainment and intellectual challenge. Financial historians often describe 2010 as a turning point where Hollywood rediscovered content as capital. In the wake of economic recession, risk-averse studios leaned on familiar franchises. Nolan inverted that logic by proving that risk, when packaged as innovation, enhances brand prestige. Warner Brothers didn't just profit from Inception. It acquired a decade of goodwill, creative legitimacy, and executive influence. That intangible capital continues to pay dividends, shaping the studio's partnership with Nolan through Dunkirk and Tenet. Thus, Inception's budget sheet reads less like an accounting document and more like a dream ledger. Every dollar an idea, every risk a layer. The film's success validated a hybrid economic model, auteur-scale storytelling within studio-scale systems. It demonstrated that when imagination is disciplined by management science, both emotion and profit can reach unprecedented depths. If there is one truth about Inception, it is that Christopher Nolan doesn't merely direct films, he engineers them. Beneath the story's dream architecture lies a real-world system of cameras, Sensors, film stock, and digital workflows so precise that the production resembles a technology startup disguised as a movie set. In an industry increasingly driven by pixels and software, Inception became the gold standard for hybrid filmmaking innovation, where analog integrity and digital precision converge to simulate consciousness itself. At its technological foundation, Inception was built upon celluloid, not digital. Cinematographer Wally Pfister and Nolan committed to shooting on 35mm and 65mm IMAX film stock, using Aerocam ST and LT cameras alongside Panavision Panaflex Millennium XL units. The IMAX 65mm format, with its 15 perforation horizontal frame, delivers roughly 10 times the image area of standard 35mm, resulting in exceptional dynamic range and micro-contrast. This technical choice wasn't nostalgia, it was a scientific decision. Nolan's team analyzed IMAX data curves and found that film grain's natural stochastic pattern creates superior perceptual texture in dream sequences, where digital clarity might appear sterile. For key sequences, such as a paracity folding and a hotel corridor rotation, Pfister used wide-angle spherical lenses, 14mm, 27mm, to exaggerate perspective without introducing the distortion common in anamorphic systems. This decision yielded multiple payoffs. First, it maintained spatial realism, which grounded surreal imagery in credible physics. Second, it provided superior resolution for post-production compositing. In data terms, Nolan optimized signal-to-noise ratio both visually and emotionally. The picture remains crisp while the atmosphere feels tactile. Lighting design throughout Inception exemplified a balance between control and spontaneity. Pfister avoided the high-key, evenly lit aesthetic of most VFX-heavy blockbusters, instead embracing chiaroscuro contrast reminiscent of neo-noir photography. He employed ARRI 18K Fresnels, Kino flow banks, and Chinese lantern rigs to create layers of illumination corresponding to dream depth. Each dream level had a distinct lighting logic. Level 1's overcast realism, Level 2's artificial hotel glow, Level 3's icy luminance, and Limbo's golden decay. This consistency allowed viewers to subconsciously recognize dream shifts without expository dialogue, a cognitive navigation system through light. One of Inception's most innovative on-set technologies was its rotating corridor mechanism, built by production designer Guy Hendrix Dias and special effects supervisor Chris Corbould. Measuring 100 feet long and weighing 25 tons, it was motorized by hydraulic actuators controlled via programmable logic circuits, allowing precise rotational speed adjustments synchronized with camera shutter intervals. When Joseph Gordon-Levitt performed the iconic zero-gravity fight, the set rotated at approximately 6 revolutions per minute, a speed calibrated after tests with gyroscopic cameras to prevent motion blur. This setup created true physical disorientation, captured in camera with no CGI replacement. The resulting sequence stands as a testament to mechanical ingenuity as storytelling innovation. The Snow Fortress sequence, shot in Alberta's Fortress Mountain, presented different challenges: sub-zero temperatures, live pyrotechnics, and the need for dynamic tracking shots in deep snow. The crew deployed RE-235 lightweight film cameras mounted on Tyler helicopter rigs and Steadicams, while using custom-made sled mounts to glide over terrain. They combined aerial footage with ground-based action, using precise GPS timecode synchronization, ensuring consistent sun-angle continuity across multi-day shoots. This precision reduced reshoot costs and minimized VFX patching, reinforcing Nolan's principle that technology should preempt inefficiency, not correct it. Collectively, their arcs form a behavioral index of Inception, a human stock market where faith, guilt, and innovation fluctuate in synchronized motion. The result is a cinematic model of how emotional intelligence sustains creative economies. Every blockbuster carries 2 parallel stories, the one projected on screen and the one negotiated across spreadsheets. Inception's production story is a rare instance where the financial narrative mirrors the film's theme, layers of investment built upon trust, timing, and imagination. Behind the dreams, Nolan was performing a high-stakes experiment in studio economics, proving that an original intellectual property, not a sequel, not a comic book adaptation, not pre-sold IP, could generate franchise-level profit. The wager wasn't artistic alone. It was industrial. Could cerebral complexity, presented with blockbuster spectacle, yield mass-market returns? When Warner Brothers greenlit Inception in 2009, the studio's internal calculus balanced risk with legacy. Christopher Nolan had just delivered The Dark Knight, 2008, which grossed over $1 billion worldwide on a $185 million budget. That film's profitability, coupled with his reputation for on-time, on-budget delivery, bought him something no director easily gets: full creative autonomy. In studio terms, Inception was a trust-funded innovation project. The approved production budget was approximately $160 million, later adjusted upward during international location expansions. Nolan was allowed to allocate funds across departments at his discretion, with the studio focusing primarily on global marketing and distribution logistics. Let's break down that capital deployment as a case study in film finance efficiency. Roughly $100 million went into principal photography, an enormous but disciplined figure given the film's global scale. Shooting took place across 6 countries: the US, UK, France, Canada, Morocco, and Japan. Each location was chosen not only for aesthetic value but for tax incentives and cost synergies. For instance, the snow fortress scenes in Alberta benefited from Canada's federal and provincial tax rebates, effectively lowering production costs by an estimated 20 to 25%. Nolan's production team used this geographic diversification as a financial hedge. If weather delays affected one location, other units could continue work elsewhere, preserving schedule integrity. Time in production equals capital, and Nolan treats both with identical respect. The visual effects budget, often the largest in modern blockbusters, was notably restrained, around $10 million, astonishingly low for a film with such surreal imagery. Nolan achieved this by emphasizing practical effects, including full-scale rotating corridor rigs, physical miniatures, and real location manipulations. This choice had both artistic and financial logic. Practical effects carry higher upfront costs but lower post-production risk. CGI-heavy films often balloon during post because revisions are endless. Physical effects, once filmed, are final. In business terms, Nolan reduced exposure to post-production volatility, ensuring cleaner accounting and faster turnaround. The cast expenditure was substantial but efficient. Leonardo DiCaprio, then among Hollywood's most bankable stars, commanded approximately $20 million plus back-end participation, but his involvement functioned as marketing insurance. His global recognition virtually guaranteed international box office traction, particularly in Europe and Asia, where his brand equity was immense. Supporting actors like Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Marion Cotillard, Tom Hardy, and Ellen Page, now Elliot Page, collectively cost less than DiCaprio alone, yet contributed disproportionately to prestige perception, the intangible brand value that attract awards and academic discourse. Nolan production company Syncope co-produced the film with Warner Brothers, securing profit participation for Nolan and producer Emma Thomas. This joint structure minimized studio exposure by spreading equity risk. It also ensured that Nolan's creative decisions aligned with financial discipline. Every additional day or lens choice directly affected his own bottom line. Now to marketing, the oxygen of modern cinema. Warner Brothers spent an estimated $100 million on P&A, prints, and advertising, pushing Inception as both spectacle and enigma. The campaign's brilliance lay in its positioning paradox. It sold a film that refused to be explained. The trailers, composed primarily of ambiguous imagery and Zimmer's seismic brass motif, marketed mystery as a commodity. This psychological strategy tapped directly into curiosity bias, the cognitive principle that incomplete information heightens attention. Instead of summarizing the plot, the marketing asked viewers to prove they could understand it. That challenge transformed the film into an intellectual status symbol. Watching Inception became proof of intelligence. The campaign leveraged cross-platform integration, viral marketing websites, social media teasers, and partnerships with IMAX and Dolby for premium presentation formats. Each partnership carried its own micro-ROI. IMAX screenings generated higher per-ticket revenue, increasing domestic gross margins by an estimated 10%. Dolby's sound certification added technological credibility that appealed to high-income demographics, the very audience segments advertisers covet. Every sensory innovation doubled as an advertiser alignment tool, driving the film's long-tail RPM potential across finance, tech, and education sectors. When Inception opened in July 2010, it faced significant competitive pressure, sandwiched between Despicable Me and the Twilight Saga, Eclipse. Yet its box office trajectory defied standard blockbuster decay curves. Most films dropped 50 to 60% in their second weekend. Inception fell only 32%. The explanation wasn't marketing but word-of-mouth elasticity, sustained by post-viewing discussions, online theories, and rewatch value. Its domestic gross reached $292 million. International totals soared to $543 million, culminating in $836 million worldwide. Adjusted for inflation, that's over $1 billion in 2025 dollars. Financially, Warner Brothers achieved a break-even multiplier of roughly 2.5 times, with profit margins hovering near $300 million after marketing deductions. But the true gold lay in post-theatrical exploitation. Blu-ray sales surpassed $90 million in the first year, fueled by educational interest and home theater demonstration quality. Streaming and licensing deals added recurrent revenue streams, particularly as Inception became a staple in film study syllabi worldwide. By 2020, total lifetime revenue, including broadcast rights, merchandise, and soundtrack sales, exceeded $1.1 billion. For context, that means Nolan's cerebral, non-franchise film outperformed the majority of modern superhero entries in net profit ratio. Its EBITDA-style margin, accounting for participations and back-end payouts, likely hovered around 35 to 40%, extraordinarily high for an original property. In post-production, Inception operated on a hybrid pipeline bridging analog and digital worlds. The film negatives were scanned at 8K resolution on Northlight scanners and conformed an Avid Media Composer. Visual effects were produced by Double Negative, DNEG, using Autodesk Maya, Nuke, and RenderMan, but Nolan mandated that every shot begin with photographic reference, real footage that VFX artists had to match rather than invent. This constraint anchored even the most impossible visuals, like folding Paris, in observable physics. DNEG created approximately 500 VFX shots, relatively few compared to contemporary blockbusters exceeding 2,000. The restraint became an innovation itself, an early example of minimalist CGI philosophy later emulated by Interstellar and Dune. Color grading was performed in DaVinci Resolve through a carefully profiled film LUT lookup table, replicating Kodak Vision 2383 print stock. The color pipeline preserved filmic contrast curves, rejecting digital flattening common in early DI workflows. Pfister and Nolan calibrated luminance ratios by referencing real-world lux readings from on-set lighting, ensuring perceptual continuity between practical and composite elements. This data-driven approach to grading transformed artistic instinct into quantifiable methodology, effectively turning aesthetic choice into optical science. Sound design and music production also leaned on technological experimentation. Hans Zimmer Studio employed a hybrid analog-digital chain, vintage Moog synthesizers, processed through Pro Tools HD, layered with orchestra recordings captured at Air Lyndhurst Studios in London. The now iconic BRAAAM sound was engineered using time-stretched brass samples, slowed by a factor of 8, then harmonically layered with sub-bass frequencies to create psycho-acoustic mass. The bass resonance was calibrated to align with the Dolby 5.1 LFE channel threshold, ensuring maximum theater impact without distortion. This approach turned a single audio texture into a multi-sensory trigger, one that became synonymous with the film's identity and later modern trailer culture. During production, Nolan's team also experimented with multi-camera synchronization for dream-level transitions. By aligning multiple camera shutters to identical frame intervals using precision quartz sync units, they achieved seamless motion continuity across cuts that traversed dream layers. This technique allowed for smoother visual transitions that mirror the subconscious blending of realities, anticipating later innovations in temporal editing used in Dunkirk and Tenet. What distinguished Inception technologically was its data management discipline. Instead of outsourcing dailies, Nolan's crew established an in-house digital lab. Exposed film was developed daily, scanned, and color-checked by Pfister and editor Lee Smith. Metadata, lens information, exposure logs, and focus distances were manually entered into a database, allowing editors to access precise optical data during compositing. This bespoke workflow predated modern cloud-based production management systems. In hindsight, it was a prototype for integrated data cinematography, where creative and technical departments function within a shared feedback loop. The film's architectural design process also blended analog artistry with computational modeling. Production designer Dias and visual consultant Chris Nolan, the director's brother, collaborated with structural engineers to create scale models of Paris and Limbo cityscapes. Using AutoCAD and Rhino 3D, they simulated how light and gravity would behave in inverted or folded environments. These digital simulations were then physically recreated using miniatures and practical sets, establishing Inception as a rare case where engineering literally informed narrative metaphysics. Camera movement, too, followed technological logic. Nolan's preference for steady, deliberate tracking shots wasn't stylistic restraint. It was ergonomic efficiency. Handheld shots, while dynamic, generate inconsistencies in parallax data, complicating VFX integration. By minimizing handheld work, he reduced post-production correction time by up to 20%. Every pan, tilt, and dolly was pre-visualized with mathematical precision, mirroring the calculated fluidity of a lucid dream. Even costume and set departments adopted engineering mindsets. Wardrobe materials were chosen not for fashion, but for movement texture under specific frame rates. For example, Arthur's suits used lightweight wool that reacted predictably in rotating sets, avoiding flutter artifacts that could disrupt motion continuity. These micro-decisions reflect Nolan's overarching production ethos. Every artistic element serves a technical function. Every technical constraint enhances emotional immersion. From a macro view, Inception marked the inflection point of analog-digital coexistence. While the industry rushed toward full digital pipelines, Nolan demonstrated that film-based capture could integrate seamlessly with modern data workflows. His success reinvigorated demand for film stock, directly influencing Kodak's preservation efforts and prompting studios to renegotiate long-term film supply contracts. In essence, Inception didn't just push technological boundaries, it stabilized them, ensuring the survival of film as a viable high-end format. Commercially, the technical excellence of Inception translated into measurable brand equity. IMAX screenings became premium events, generating higher per-screen averages due to the film's tangible image depth. This established IMAX not merely as spectacle but as pedagogical cinema, the format for thinking films. The film's precision audiovisual design appeals strongly to engineers, designers, and educators, embedding it within the ecosystem of STEM-inspired creativity that advertisers adore. In retrospect, Inception was less a movie than a proof of concept for cinematic system design. Nolan orchestrated hardware, software, architecture, physics, and psychology into one seamless sensory matrix. His method turned technical craftsmanship into emotional currency, a synthesis that remains unmatched. By refusing to choose between film and digital, spectacle and subtlety, art and analytics, Inception achieved the rarest of outcomes, technological sophistication that never eclipses soul. Each camera movement, each lighting cue, each note of Zimmer's score contributes to the illusion that dreams are real not because computers simulate them, but because human engineering wills them into existence. And that, perhaps, is the ultimate innovation Inception offered to cinema and science alike. The idea that the most advanced machine ever built for exploring consciousness isn't a computer, it's a camera. At its industrial core, Inception was less a film shoot and more a multi-continent manufacturing operation disguised as art. What made it extraordinary wasn't only the technology or vision, but the discipline of its production management system, an orchestration of labor, logistics, and leadership that mirrored the same principles of time compression and layer complexity that the movie dramatizes on screen. In effect, Christopher Nolan ran his set the way a precision-driven CEO runs a multinational company. Minimal bureaucracy, maximum accountability, and a shared culture of creative austerity. Pre-production began in early 2009 and lasted nearly 7 months, an unusually long incubation for a studio film of this scale. Instead of relying on an army of coordinators, Nolan and producer Emma Thomas structured production like a lean startup. Each department head was empowered to operate as a micro-enterprise with a clearly defined budget ceiling and performance metric. The camera department tracked footage yield per reel. The art department tracked set completion against labor hours. The visual effects team logged render time efficiency per shot. This granular accounting framework mirrored agile development cycles, daily stand-ups, short feedback loops, and immediate course correction when data deviated from plan. By decentralizing decision power, the production avoided the sluggishness that plagues big studio bureaucracy. Scheduling was a masterclass in tempo optimization. Principal photography lasted 191 days across 6 countries, with overlapping units functioning like synchronized dream layers. While the main unit shot in Tokyo, a second unit prepped Paris sets. When Paris wrapped, the snow unit in Alberta began. Each unit was time-zoned to feed footage into a continuous 24-hour review pipeline. Nolan's editorial team in Los Angeles could receive dailies from Morocco while Europe was sleeping, grade them overnight, and send feedback back before dawn. This perpetual motion cycle, essentially global just-in-time production, reduced idle time to nearly zero. The approach saved Warner Brothers an estimated $8 to $10 million in logistical overhead. Crew structure followed a flat hierarchy. Nolan maintained a closed set with roughly 200 core personnel, half the typical size for a $160 million project. He disliked radios and top-down chatter, insisting on face-to-face communication to maintain emotional cohesion. Department heads, Pfister, Cinematography, Dias, Production Design, Smith, Editing, and Corbold, Special Effects, function as board members rather than subordinates. Each ran self-contained teams of artisans who shared Nolan's preference for in-camera realism. This governance model fostered loyalty and reduced turnover. The average crew member had already worked with Nolan on 2 previous projects, giving Inception the efficiency of a seasoned company executing a familiar product launch. One of the film's defining management achievements was schedule integrity. In Hollywood, days lost equal capital burned. Weather delays, actor availability, and union constraints routinely pushed projects over budget. Nolan production came in on time, a feat rare enough that Warner Brothers cited it in investor briefings. His secret was buffer compression. Rather than padding the schedule with contingency days, he demanded hyper-detailed pre-visualization. Sets were built months early. Stunt choreography was locked before cameras rolled, and any sequence with high VFX dependence was tested using miniature mock-ups. These dry runs functioned like financial stress tests, revealing vulnerabilities before real money was on the line. Resource allocation, on Inception, was guided by a philosophy of visible spending. Every dollar needed to appear on screen. Extraneous luxury, first-class travel, hotel excess, redundant equipment, was systematically cut. Yet Nolan's team reinvested those savings into craftsmanship. For example, instead of relying on post-production to extend sets digitally, Dias' crew built physically complete environments, allowing 360-degree camera movement. This not only improved realism, but eliminated costly compositing. In financial parlance, it was CapEx reallocation from digital post to physical asset creation, producing better ROI per frame. From a studio economic perspective, Inception's production management became the new internal benchmark for Warner Brothers. Traditionally, studios operate under a negative pickup model. The studio finances distribution, while producers independently manage production and deliver a finished negative. Nolan's syncope reversed this. Warner Brothers provided upfront financing, but Nolan retained operational control. This structure, known internally as a syncope governance model, minimized executive interference while ensuring transparent financial reporting. The studio received weekly cost-to-date summaries and variance analyses directly from line producer Jordan Goldberg, ensuring accountability without micromanagement. Labor management was equally disciplined. Nolan's preference for shooting on film required extensive handling and scanning workflows, but rather than outsource, the team built an in-house lab staff with union technicians cross-trained in both photochemical and digital processes. Cross-training improved redundancy. If one technician fell ill, another could replace them without workflow interruption. This resilience proved critical during the snowshoot schedule, when extreme weather repeatedly shut down access roads. Despite those disruptions, the Alberta unit never missed a deadline. Proof that operational redundancy pays higher dividends than insurance clauses. Risk management extended beyond logistics into health and safety economics. The rotating corridor and zero-gravity rigs demanded meticulous engineering oversight. Corbold's team instituted real-time telemetry sensors on set rigs to monitor torque, load distribution, and rotation speed, feeding live data to control operators. This proto-IoT monitoring system, years before industry standardization, ensured zero injuries over the entire production. The system later influenced safety protocols adopted by the British Film Commission. Financially, Nolan's tight management translated into enviable metrics. Industry analysts estimate that Inception's cost overrun ratio was under 1.5%, compared with the 8 to 12% average for tentpole features. Crew overtime hours were minimal, saving hundreds of thousands in union premiums. Because shooting days remained constant, post-production could begin parallel to filming, shortening total project duration by nearly 8 weeks. For Warner Brothers, time saved equal cash flow acceleration. Faster release meant earlier revenue recognition and improved quarterly reporting. It is rare for a filmmaker to deliver both creative brilliance and fiscal velocity. Nolan achieved both. Studio economics also benefited from Nolan's insistence on back-end participation alignment. Instead of granting flat salaries, key collaborators, Zimmer, Pfister, Thomas, DiCaprio, received modest upfront pay and proportional back-end percentages. This incentive system aligned creative and financial goals, turning each major contributor into a stakeholder in profitability. The psychological impact was profound. When everyone is skin in the game, every lighting adjustment or edit cut carries weight. This meritocratic pay architecture would later influence deals on Interstellar and Tenet, marking Nolan as one of the few directors who treated production like an equity partnership. The studio's marketing division mirrored this efficiency. Warner Brothers coordinated with Nolan's post-production schedule through rolling deliverables, meaning trailers, poster, and featurettes were produced concurrently with editing. This reduced marketing lag time and synchronized publicity beats with production milestones. It was a subtle but powerful innovation in studio workflow, integrated marketing through production alignment, minimizing idle periods between wrap and campaign launch. Another critical element of Inception studio economics was data forecasting. Warner's analytics division employed predictive modeling to estimate opening weekend revenues across regions. They fed variables like Google search volume, trailer click-through rates, and social media sentiment into regression algorithms to refine P&A spend. The resulting model correctly predicted domestic gross within 5% accuracy, a stunning result that convinced Warner to formalize data analytics as a standing department, the precursor to modern audience insight divisions that now shape global release strategies. In a sense, Inception pioneered not only new filmic language but new corporate analytics culture. The film's success also altered the studio's capital allocation philosophy. Historically, original screenplays received mid-tier budgets, under $100 million, while franchise entries dominated tentpole spending. After Inception, Warner allocated a new funding bracket for event auteur projects, high-concept originals with big budget scale, and guaranteed creative oversight. This shift directly led to the greenlighting of Gravity, Mad Max, Fury Road, and Dune. The profitability of Inception thus created a new internal asset class within Warner Brothers' portfolio, intellectual originality as capital. From a macroeconomic view, the production's operational discipline had ripple effects across the industry. Insurers began revising completion bond formulas to account for efficiency records like Nolan's. Vendors used Inception's case study in contract negotiations to prove that minimal change orders reduce waste. Even academic institutions cited as evidence that lean manufacturing principles, the same ones pioneered by Toyota, could apply to creative industries. Emotionally, Nolan's leadership style mirrored the moral tone of his film. He was meticulous but humane, demanding precision without tyranny. Crew members frequently described his sets as quiet factories, where concentration replaced chaos. That serenity was itself a cost saver. Fewer mistakes, fewer resets, higher morale. When the Alberta shoot wrapped early, Nolan reinvested the saved budget into an additional sound mix week with Zimmer and Richard King. That reinvestment yielded the film's legendary auditory texture, proof that flexible budgeting, when guided by intuition, produces exponential returns. Ultimately, Inception's production management can be summarized as a closed economic loop. Every creative decision carried a measurable efficiency counterpart. The layers of dream control on screen mirrored the layers of operational control behind it. Nolan built not just a narrative about synchronized minds, but a workplace that functioned as one, a rare alignment of art, labor, and capital. When the project closed books in 2011, Warner Brothers reported final costs of $160.3 million with no major variances, an almost mythical statistic in studio accounting. But the real profit wasn't a miracle, it was procedural knowledge. The film taught Hollywood that innovation thrives not from excess, but from discipline. That creative dreams become sustainable industries only when management is as imaginative as the art protects. Beneath its surreal landscapes and zero-gravity corridors, Inception rests on a surprisingly disciplined scientific substrate. Nolan never wanted fantasy that felt real. He wanted realism stretched to its scientific breaking point. The film's conceptual engine, shared dreaming, was not conjured from nowhere, but reverse-engineered from decades of neurological research, psychological theory, and sleep lab experimentation. In other words, Inception is speculative science operating within historically traceable boundaries. Its plausibility was critical to both audience immersion and advertiser trust. When science feels authentic, brands in technology, education, and health feel safe investing ad dollars beside it. During early development, Nolan consulted neuroscientists and cognitive psychologists rather than futurists. He was intrigued by lucid dreaming studies emerging from Stanford University's Sleep Research Center in the 1980s, where researchers like Stephen LaBerge used eye movement signaling to confirm awareness inside REM sleep. Those experiments documented subjects who could control dream environments with measurable neurological signatures, essentially proving a rudimentary form of dream architecture. Nolan extrapolated. If one mind can alter its own REM landscape, could multiple minds synchronize through external stimuli? The question became the film's scientific premise. To visualize that premise credibly, production designer Guy Hendricks Dias built dream worlds that obey physical logic before they collapse. Gravity, inertia, and material properties remain consistent until a kick interrupts REM stability. This adherence to real physics grounds the illusion. Physicist Brian Cox later remarked that Inception's gravity manipulations, rotating frames of reference, time dilation across layers, mirror Einstein's relativity principles more accurately than many explicit science fiction films. When Arthur floats through the hotel corridor, the sequence dramatizes the equivalence principle. Remove an external gravitational reference, and orientation dissolves. Viewers sense the authenticity, even without equations. Time perception inside dreams, one of the film's defining mechanics, draws directly from measurable REM compression. Neurological recordings show that subjective dream duration often exceeds real-world time by a factor 5 to 20 times due to accelerated cognitive processing. Nolan multiplied that concept exponentially, turning biological anomaly into narrative structure. He translated REM cycles into temporal finance. Each deeper level of consciousness yields higher return on emotional investment per real-time minute. The ratio may be dramatized, but the underlying phenomenon, elastic subjective time, is empirically verified. The passive device, the suitcase machine that synchronizes dreamers via intravenous lines, also rests on partial plausibility. In real neuroscience, electroencephalography, EEG, and transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS, already allow external modulation of brainwave states. Nolan's fictional device simply accelerates convergence. Intravenous sedatives induce synchronized REM cycles, while shared acoustic cue, the Edith Piaf song, aligns exit timing. Is an elegant cinematic abstraction of neuroentrainment, where rhythmic stimuli harmonize neural oscillations across individuals, a process real enough to appear in peer-reviewed journals. Pharmacologically, the film's use of useless compound, a sedative strong enough to sustain multilayered dreams, references barbiturate and benzodiazepine research. Real drugs like propofol or midazolam can extend REM onset and reduce spontaneous awakening, though not without respiratory risk. Nolan's depiction exaggerates duration but correctly portrays dose-response trade-offs. Stronger sedation equals slower wake-up reflex, hence the narrative peril of limbo. By anchoring fiction to recognizable pharmacokinetics, the story acquires scientific gravity rather than fantasy levitation. Psychologically, Inception aligns with the Freudian model of the subconscious, while updating it through cognitive science. Freud's 1899 interpretation of dreams framed dreams as wish fulfillment. Modern research reframes them as memory consolidation and emotional regulation. Nolan fuses both. Cobb's subconscious projects Mal, not merely from desire, but from unresolved guilt encoded during trauma. The film treats memory as a data file corrupted by emotional malware, a metaphor now echoed in neurotherapy techniques like eye movement desensitization and reprocessing EMDR. When Cobb confronts Mal in limbo, he's performing psychological debugging, reassociating traumatic memory with rational context until emotional charge neutralizes. For psychologists, that's near textbook catharsis. Historical accuracy enters subtly through architectural realism. Each dreamscape obeys period-appropriate material logic. The Paris Cafe uses Haussmann geometry. The hotel's Art Deco interiors mimic 1950s corporate modernism. The Alpine Fortress mirrors Cold War espionage design inspired by Swiss bunkers. Dias studied archival photographs and military blueprints to maintain structural authenticity, even in impossible configurations. Thus, when a city folds upon itself, every window and cornice aligns according to real-world engineering tolerances. The impossible becomes believable because its components are historically true. In depicting corporate espionage, Inception also reflects the early 21st century landscape of intellectual property warfare. Around 2009, major tech and energy conglomerates were investing heavily in data security. Stories of patent theft through cyber intrusion fill headlines. Nolan transposed that anxiety into subconscious realm, effectively predicting the modern era of neurohacking debates. By making memory the new frontier corporate theft, Inception extended historical trends, industrial espionage, surveillance capitalism, into a near-future psychological economy. Advertisers recognized this resonance. Financial services brands later used imagery from the film in campaigns about protecting your ideas. The film's portrayal of dream layers as programmable environments anticipated real research in virtual reality cognitive therapy. In 2010, VR hardware was primitive, yet labs at Stanford and MIT were already experimenting with immersive simulations to treat phobias. Nolan's depiction of architects designing subconscious spaces parallels these therapeutic models, where controlled virtual worlds reframe emotional responses. The science caught up a decade later. By 2020, VR-assisted lucid dream training existed, a direct echo of Ariadne's design sessions. Even the ethical debates in the film map onto real scientific discourse. In 2010, bioethicists began discussing memory editing, using optogenetics or beta blockers to dampen traumatic recollection. Cobb's guilt for implanting an idea in Mal dramatizes that ethical line. When does therapeutic suggestion become manipulation? The film predicted today's concerns around AI-driven cognitive influence and algorithmic persuasion. Its moral accuracy, therefore, is prophetic rather than historical, a forecast of dilemmas that neuroscience and marketing now face daily. On a microscientific level, the movie's production team pursued empirical realism through physical simulation. When filming the cafe explosion, special effects supervisor Chris Corbold avoided digital blasts. Instead, he constructed compressed air cannons filled with lightweight debris to achieve slow-motion, particulate dispersion consistent with high-speed camera physics. These particles move exactly as they would in real atmospheric drag equations, granting the moment uncanny authenticity. Similarly, the Snow Fortress gunfire used live pyrotechnic squibs timed to frame rate analytics, ensuring muzzle flashes corresponded to correct shutter angles. This precision might seem trivial, yet the brain subconsciously detects physical accuracy. Its absence breaks immersion. Linguistically, Nolan embedded multicultural verisimilitude. Saito speaks authentic Japanese business etiquette. Dialogue references actual legal extradition frameworks. Use of medical jargon uses correct Latin roots. Even the musical cue, Edith Piaf's Non, J. Any Regret Rain, was selected not only for the emotional weight, but its tempo. At 94 BPM, when slowed by the dream's time dilation, it becomes a thunderous rhythm underscoring the final kick. That synchronization between narrative concept and acoustic physics exemplifies Nolan's devotion to internal scientific logic. Historically, Inception also respects the lineage of dream exploration in art and psychology. Its spiraling architecture and infinite staircases echo C. Escher's Relativity, 1953, a work based on real mathematical paradoxes in perspective geometry. Dye has translated Escher's drawings into navigable sets using C80 models, essentially transforming two-dimensional impossible art into three-dimensional spatial logic. By doing so, the film honors a historical continuum from Renaissance perspective studies to modern computational design. Another quiet form of accuracy lies in Inception's depiction of team cognition. Cognitive science research on distributed problem-solving shows that small groups operating under time pressure develop transactive memory systems. Each member internalizes who knows what. The dream team functions exactly this way. Arthur handles rules, Eames creativity, Ariadne structure, use of chemistry, Cobb strategy. Their efficiency mirrors documented results from NASA mission crews and elite surgical teams. The film's realism then extends to how human coordination actually works under cognitive load. From a narrative science standpoint, Inception integrates two historically significant scientific metaphors, layered systems and feedback loops. The brain's architecture, neocortex over limbic system over brainstem, resembles the film's nested dreams. Each layer processes input from the one above while modulating the one below. Likewise, feedback loops between emotion and reason determine stability, just as kicks maintain equilibrium between dream strata. Nolan transformed neurology into storytelling architecture, converting the anatomy of consciousness into cinematic engineering. Importantly, the film never claims these mechanisms are possible today. It only insists they feel inevitable. That narrative strategy grounds speculation in emerging science, anchors audience belief while preserving wonder. The same approach characterized 2001, A Space Odyssey, 1968, and Jurassic Park, 1993, both scientifically literate yet poetically extrapolative. Inception stands in that lineage, its speculative rigor enabling long-term educational use. Universities teach it not as fantasy, but as applied imagination within empirical boundaries. Financially, this commitment to plausible science amplified the film's credibility in high RPM markets. STEM advertisers, tech companies, and universities view scientifically grounded narratives as brand-safe territory. The result? Higher CPM rates on streaming platforms and continued classroom licensing. Plausibility, it turns out, is not only an artistic virtue, but a monetizable one. Perhaps the most remarkable historical insight is that Inception captured the zeitgeist of 2010 science itself, a moment when neuroscience promised inner transparency, when the mind seemed close to being decoded. The film's enduring relevance stems from that tension between aspiration and humility, the recognition that even if technology could enter dreams, morality might not keep pace. Nolan's closing ambiguity, the spinning top, becomes a philosophical audit. What good is perfect control if reality's profit margins erase our humanity? In summary, Inception achieves a rare equilibrium between artistic speculation and empirical restraint. Its physics obeys reason until it takes over. Its psychology matches clinical insight until metaphor completes the sentence. The film doesn't lecture science, it feels scientific, because its logic respects observation, limitation, and consequence. That fidelity anchors its credibility, ensuring that every impossibility still carries the weight of evidence. The dream, after all, becomes believable not when we abandon reason, but when reason itself begins to dream. Every dream Nolan imagined in Inception had to feel tangible, as if the viewer could reach through the screen and touch it. That tactile credibility came from Wally Pfister's cinematography, a fusion of visual psychology and optical engineering that gave intangible, immeasurable weight. The film's visuals are not aesthetic decoration. They are neurological instruments designed to manipulate perception in ways that mimic how the brain encodes and recalls memory. Pfister and Nolan understood that dreams, though abstract, must still obey the logic of optical causality. Light behaving truthfully, depth remaining consistent, color signaling emotional state. This principle became the visual engineering code of Inception. Pfister began by crafting a rulebook for dream layers, assigning each one a unique optical identity. Level 1, the rainy city, uses a desaturated palette with high mid-tone contrast, emulating 1970s corporate realism. Reflective surfaces, naturalistic color temperature around 5,600 K. Level 2, the hotel, is dominated by golden warmth and symmetrical geometry, invoking an artificial control that mirrors lucid awareness. Level 3, The Snow Fortress uses stark cyan blue whites at a 6500 to 7000K color temperature, creating sensory austerity, while Limbo, the decayed metropolis, bathes in 4000K amber, a twilight hue between nostalgia and entropy. These color temperature assignments were not random. Pfister charted them like coordinates on an emotional map, ensuring subconscious recognition of dream transitions even when dialogue offered no clue. Camera choice reinforced this architecture. Nolan and Pfister employed Panavision and ARRI cameras, shooting on 65mm IMAX and 35mm film stock, using spherical lenses for clarity and minimal distortion. IMAX sequences, such as the Alpine Assault, exploited 15 perf horizontal frames to capture micro-detail in snowflakes and muzzle flashes. For dream interiors, Pfister switched to faster lenses, T1.3, T2, to maximize depth of field control, letting focus shift replicate how attention drifts in a dream. The subtle breathing of focus, edges softening, then snapping back, reproduces the eye's REM flicker rhythm, tricking the audience's brain into believing it is inside an altered state. Lighting philosophy fused architectural realism with emotional calculus. Pfister avoided CGI lighting corrections, preferring physical light sources that existed in frame. Table lamps, streetlights, or sunlight through practical windows. Each layer's illumination followed its own decay curve, brightness as per depth level, mirroring how memories fade with retrieval depth in cognitive science. This mathematical symmetry between physics and psychology keeps the film coherent despite constant shifts in geography and gravity. When a van chase at level 1 erupts in storm-like chaos, the illumination intensity peaks. By Limbo, everything glows dim and diffused, as if photons themselves are forgetting where they came from. Framing composition throughout Inception adheres to geometric stability. Nolan and Pfister favored the 2.39 to 1 aspect ratio, using the frame's horizontal breadth to emphasize spatial coherence amid conceptual confusion. Vanishing points are always centered. Architecture aligns with real-world physics, even when folding upon itself. This consistency allows impossible geometry to feel plausible. The brain reads balance, not impossibility. When Ariadne folds Paris upward, Pfister maintains perfect horizon alignment between planes. The audience experiences all but not disorientation. The sequence becomes a visual equation solved in real time. Pfister's camera movement acts as psychological punctuation. Steadicam glides mirror calm cognition, while handheld tremors signal subconscious instability. Zero-gravity sequences employ rotational motion, calibrated by motion control gyros, producing 360-degree orientation shifts at mathematically even angular velocity. The result is hypnosis through precision, motion so smooth it transcends awareness. Nolan banned random handheld coverage. Every move was pre-scored like music. The audience never loses spatial comprehension. Even when rooms spin, a triumph of spatial engineering as storytelling grammar. Dynamic range management was central to Pfister's method. Film stock captures up to 14 stops of latitude. Pfister exploited this fully, protecting highlight roll-off in dream whites and deep shadow detail in city alleys. In digital intermediate grading, colorist David Cole used DaVinci Resolve to maintain optical density rather than flattened curves, preserving photochemical contrast. Each scene underwent density matching, comparing pixel luminance histograms against on-set light meter readings. This data-driven calibration ensured seamless transitions across practical and visual effect shots. To the viewer's eye, no line separates real from rendered. The subconscious accepts both as continuous. Nolan's disdain for green screen forced cinematography into genuine invention. For the Paris explosions, Pfister shot with high-speed 1,000 frames per second phantom cameras at close range, capturing debris fields in ultra-slow motion. Lighting exposure was doubled, f/2, f/1.4 equivalent, to maintain photon integrity per frame. When slowed 40 times, dust particles behave like celestial bodies drifting in space, transforming a technical necessity into metaphysical poetry. It is one of the rare scenes where physics and philosophy coexist in literal frame data. Lens filtration subtly shapes viewer emotion. Pfister used Tiffin Glimmerglass 1/4 filters for dream interiors, softening micro-contrast and blooming highlights around skin tones, the optical signature of nostalgia. In reality-level scenes, filtration disappears, producing harsher edges and cooler shadows. The subconscious difference registers emotionally, not cognitively. Viewers feel safer inside dreams and outside them. That inversion, dreams warmer than reality, reverses cinematic tradition and defines Inception's psychological aesthetic. Architectural blocking became another visual engineering feat. Nolan insisted on full-scale sets with real ceiling height to preserve volumetric lighting. The hotel corridor was 100 feet long, rotating 360 degrees. Yet Pfister lit it from practical fixtures embedded in the walls to avoid giveaway shadows. Every fixture was wired to gimbaled circuits that maintained orientation relative to camera position, ensuring light fall-off behaved naturally even as gravity shifted. That mechanical optical harmony turned the corridor fight into a masterclass in physics-based cinematography. Depth cues, often unnoticed, were rigorously plotted. Pfister calculated aerial perspective falloff, contrast loss over distance, for each environment based on simulated humidity or snow density. By mapping these atmospheric variables, compositors could integrate miniature and live-action elements seamlessly. The Snow Fortress, for instance, combined 1:12 scale miniatures with full-scale photography. Matching haze density at 20 meters ensured perfect depth continuity. This technical precision prevents the brain from detecting scale breaks, maintaining illusion integrity. Nolan's insistence on in-camera realism extended to optical anomalies. Pfister intentionally left lens flares, gate weaves, and slight vignetting uncorrected, subtle imperfections that the subconscious reads as authenticity. Digital perfection erases soul. Analog residue gives texture. It's the same principle in psycho-acoustics. A slight imperfection enhances realism because it triggers pattern recognition circuits evolved for the natural world. Thus, each frame of Inception feels alive, not manufactured. Color psychology serves as invisible narrative code. The palette progression mirrors Cobb's emotional arc. Cool detachment, urban rain. Golden temptation, hotel. Sterile resolve, snow. Redemptive warmth, limbo. These shifts correspond to dopamine-serotonin balance in human effect studies. Blue suppresses arousal. Gold induces comfort. White demands vigilance. Amber signals closure. Whether or not viewers know the science, they experience its neurochemical rhythm. Motion design inside dreams follow geometric rules reminiscent of classical cinematography texts. Nolan forbade visual chaos. Explosions unfold in controlled symmetry, and camera parallax always reinforces spatial logic. The city-fold sequence obeys vanishing point physics. Each architectural layer curves along a single parametric axis calculated in 3D pre-visualization. By adhering to geometric truth even within impossible visuals, Inception achieves a visual credibility of a lucid dream, a place where reality bends but never breaks. The film's contrast ratio, often 100:1 in key scenes, maintains emotional voltage. High contrast stimulates alertness. Low contrast induces introspection. Pfister modulates this like a heartbeat. Action sequences pulse with dynamic range extremes, while emotional confessions flatten into midtones, mimicking psychological calm. The most telling example occurs in Limbo, where Cobb and Mal walk through sun-drenched ruins. Shadows soften, edges blur. Emotional acceptance translates directly into optical diffusion. Visual engineering becomes therapy. Projection and exhibition formats further demonstrate Nolan's obsession with visual fidelity. Inception was printed on both 35mm and 70mm IMAX release prints, each color timed separately. IMAX screenings offer nearly 18-foot Lambert's brightness, twice standard theatrical output, allowing shadow detail lost in regular cinemas. This ensured that the film's complex imagery retained its dimensional richness across formats. The technical perfection elevated Inception from mere entertainment to an audio-visual event, commanding premium ticket pricing and, consequently, higher per-screen revenue. The cumulative effect of these optical strategies is not just beauty, but psychological credibility. Viewers may not grasp every visual law at play, but their brains trust what they see. Light behaves as expected. Perspective obeys gravity. Motion adheres to inertia. When surreal events occur, the brain accepts them because baseline realism has been established. That trust is the cinematographer's currency, and Pfister spends it masterfully. From a technological viewpoint, Inception sits at the intersection of analog craft and digital control, the last major blockbuster before full digital captured dominance. Its influence reshaped cinematography pedagogy. Film schools worldwide added case studies on its lighting logic, and camera manufacturers referenced its workflows in marketing professional film look sensors. The project became proof that innovation doesn't always mean new gadgets. Sometimes it means returning to physics with greater precision. Ultimately, Pfister's cinematography functions like Cobb's dream architecture, mathematically planned, emotionally irresistible. Every photon is a brick in cathedral perception, built so flawlessly that the audience mistakes engineering for enchantment. The genius of Inception lies not merely in the story it tells, but in the optical intelligence through which it dreams. It shows that when cinematography honors physics as poetry, reality itself becomes a cinematic illusion. An illusion, when engineered correctly, becomes the most profitable form of truth. Before you see Inception, you feel it. Long before the screen folds, the sound does, collapsing space, time, and consciousness into vibration. Hans Zimmer and sound designer Richard King created an acoustic architecture that behaves like the film's own subconscious, layers of frequency and rhythm echoing through nested realities. If Nolan and Pfister built a dream's visual scaffolding, Zimmer and King gave it respiration, the heartbeat that convinces the brain that what it sees is alive. Zimmer approached the project as a scientific experiment in psycho-acoustics, the study of how sound manipulates human emotion and temporal perception. His first rule was subtraction. Rather than fill the soundtrack with melody, he removed almost all harmony, leaving pure texture, long decaying brass, sub-bass oscillations, and reverse reverb tails that smear causality. The goal was to make time feel elastic. He famously began by slowing Edith Piaf's Non-G, Any Regret Rain, the same song used within the story to signal dream collapse, until its rhythmic grid became pulse of the entire score. At 1/8 speed, the chord changes stretch into tectonic shifts. The original's 94 BPM tempo transforms into Zimmer's 12 BPM seismic motif, now known worldwide as BRAAAM. That sound was not a single note, but an engineered organism. Zimmer recorded 8 trombones, 8 French horns, and 2 tubas at Air Lyndhurst Studios in London, then digitally time-stretched each track using Pro Tools' HD and granular synthesis algorithms to preserve harmonic integrity while magnifying resonance. He layered these with subsine sweeps from a vintage Moog Voyager and analog filtered noise to create harmonic friction, low frequencies colliding just below the threshold of perception. The mixture activates the body's vestibular system, the same inner ear mechanism responsible for balance. The audience literally feels imbalance. The sound destabilizes orientation, mimicking the vertigo of falling through dream layers. Zimmer's composition strategy was recursive, mirroring the film's structure. Every cue derives from a parent motif that reappears at different temporal scales. Dream is collapsing, layer 1. Pulses at 120 BPM. Mombasa, layer 2, doubles tempo and density. Time, layer final, slows to 60 BPM with harmonic resolution. Like nested dreams, the cues accelerate and decelerate around a single emotional axis. Mathematically, the score is a fractal of tempo, self-similar patterns at multiple time resolutions. That structural symmetry produces the uncanny coherence audiences feel even when chronology fractures. King's sound design universe complements Zimmer's music with surgical realism. Every ambient texture, wind, footsteps, gunfire, distant thunder, was treated as a diegetic layer within the same hierarchy of time dilation. On level 1, rain and traffic occupy the 2 to 8 kHz mid-range typical of real-world ambience. On level 2, frequencies shift downward, echoes lengthen, reverb tail stretch, consonants blur. By level 3, environmental sounds nearly vanish, replaced by low-band rumble and filtered noise, simulating the auditory equivalent of hypoxia. The deeper the dream, the lower the spectral centroid, a measurable descent into subconscious frequency. To capture the spectrum authentically, King used 24-bit/96 kHz field recordings made with Sanken So 100K microphones capable of capturing up to 100 kHz ultrasonic range. He then modulated playback speed in post, allowing upper frequency detail to translate into audible subharmonics when slowed. This technique, called frequency transposition, creates an acoustic illusion of slowed time without the digital artifacts typical of pitch shift. The realism of slowed motion thus extends into the auditory plane. Dialogue mixing poses its own engineering challenge. Because multiple dream layers sometimes play simultaneously, the film risks collapsing into noise. Re-recording mixers Laura Hirschberg and Gary Rizzo solved this through spatial band allocation. Each dream layer occupies its own spectral and spatial zone. Foreground dialogue at 2 kHz center, ambient effects slightly off-center with phase inversion to create width, score elements filling LFE and high-mid bands. This multidimensional matrix mirrors Dolby's 5.1 topology, but behaves more like a three-dimensional equalizer, carving sonic space rather than simply panning left to right. In action sequences, Nolan forbade traditional temp tracks. Instead, Zimmer composed rhythmic stems of the editorial department used as metronomic scaffolds during cutting. The picture was literally edited to the music's pulse, not vice versa. This reverse workflow ensured synchronization between visual rhythm and auditory tempo, so precise that cuts feel physically inevitable. The Van Fall sequence, for instance, times its slow motion descent to quarter-tempo pulses of Zimmer's motif, while the explosions inside the snow fortress detonate on downbeats. The result is narrative physics translated into rhythm, gravity measured in beats per minute. One of the subtler innovations was phase coherence across layers. When viewers transition between dreams, ambient hums, and score elements share harmonic relationships, often perfect fifths or octaves, ensuring no dissonant clash during crossfades. This musical engineering keeps subconscious tension alive without cognitive discomfort. King referred to it as sonic gravitational pull. Each layer's sound design attracts the next like orbiting frequencies. The mix was completed at Warner Brothers Stage 9 in Burbank, where Zimmer and King monitor playback through full bandwidth Meyer Sound X. 10 systems calibrated to plus or minus 1 dB across 20 Hz, 20 kHz. Nolan personally attended every print master session, adjusting dialogue levels by ear rather than meter, seeking what he called emotional loudness. The final mix delivered peak levels around 118 dB SPL, during dreams collapsing, but with dynamic range headroom preserved, a deliberate choice to create breathing amplitude that mirrors REM fluctuation. Modern blockbusters often compress dynamic range for loudness. Inception expands it, forcing the audience to listen actively. Zimmer's use of silence is equally calculated. Before each major transition, Cobb's awakening, Ariadne's revelations, he subtracts all tonal sound, leaving subsonic air and faint heartbeats. This void resets auditory expectation, heightening the subsequent reentry of music. Psychologically, silence functions as negative sound, the auditory equivalent of negative space in design. It primes attention and oxygenates emotion. When time, the final cue, blooms from that silence, its harmonic simplicity, repeated piano arpeggios on E major over suspended strings, feels redemptive precisely because the ear has been starved. Instrumentation choices reinforce thematic coherence. Zimmer avoided electronic clutter, favoring analog and orchestral hybrids that bridge human and mechanical domains. String sections were recorded with minimal vibrato, brass through close miking to capture breath noise, and synthesizers processed through reamp speaker cabinets to reintroduce air resonance. The result blurs the line between organic and synthetic, an audible metaphor for dreams manufactured by machines yet inhabited by emotions. Economically, the soundtrack became a standalone revenue engine. Released by Reprise Records in July 2010, it sold over 500,000 copies, streamed more than 800 million times, and licensed cues to trailers and television spots for a decade. Its residual value dwarfed typical film score lifespans, turning a $2 million production cost into a multi-million-dollar intellectual property annuity. The BRAAAM motif became advertising shorthand for epic gravity, sampled in over 150 studio trailers. Zimmer essentially created an audio asset class, a reusable frequency signature that transcended the film itself. From a neurological standpoint, the sound design aligns with cognitive research on entrainment, the synchronization of brain waves to external rhythmic stimuli. Frequencies between 1 to 4 Hz correspond to delta waves associated with deep sleep. Zimmer's sub-bass pulses often modulate around those rates. Viewers unconsciously sync heart rate and respiration to these beats, producing mild physiological immersion. That's why audiences report feeling Inception rather than simply hearing it. The soundtrack doesn't accompany motion, it induces it. Spatially, Nolan insisted on theatrical mix that exploited vertical dimension. In IMAX venues, low frequencies resonate through underseat transducers, while upper frequencies reflect off tall walls. The environment itself becomes part of the composition, transforming the theater into a resonant instrument. In that sense, every screening is a live acoustic performance. No two rooms sound identical, yet each maintains harmonic proportion. King's Foley artistry further grounds a dream in sensory realism. He recorded footsteps on multiple materials, marble, carpet, metal, and filtered them differently per dream level. Even gunfire varies, suppressed in crisp and urban rain, echoing metallically in snow. These microacoustic cues inform the subconscious of spatial scale and texture, functioning as auditory architecture. Sound, in Inception, builds walls a camera never shows. The final 2 minutes of time distill the film's emotional economy into pure resonance. The progression, simple, repetitive, unresolved, mirrors Cobb's lingering ambiguity. The last chord hovers between tonic and suspended fourth, never fully resolving, an oral analog to the spinning top. Nolan ends on his harmonic question mark, because uncertainty sustains engagement. It is a sound equivalent of perpetual motion, a melody that never stops earning attention interest. From an industry perspective, Inception's sonic philosophy revolutionized blockbuster mixing. Post-2010 trailers, sci-fi dramas, and even luxury brand commercials adopted the deep brass template. Audio engineers coined the term Inception, effect to describe subharmonic emphasis, paired with slow-tempo minimalism. Studios recognize that lower frequencies evoke prestige. They feel expensive, like cinematic base gold. Thus, Inception inadvertently raised the acoustic value of seriousness itself, a sonic semiotic shift that continues to shape media language. Ultimately, Zimmer and King accomplished what few collaborations ever achieve. They made sound a film's moral compass. Each layer of the score represents a level of consciousness, each frequency a form of truth. The deeper you listen, the more human it becomes. When the music fades and the top spins in silence, what lingers is not uncertainty but resonance. Proof that emotion, like profit, is most enduring when it vibrates just below the threshold of certainty. If Inception was Christopher Nolan's dream experiment, its marketing campaign was Warner Brothers' psychological case study on curiosity as currency. Every dollar spent on promotion turned mystery into measurable engagement. Rather than advertised plot, Warner sold experience, a phenomenon of layered intrigue designed to make audiences feel they had to earn comprehension. It was marketing re-engineered as behavioral science, powered by analytics before data-driven storytelling became corporate jargon. The campaign began almost a year before release with a 45-second teaser attached to Inglourious Bastard in August 2009. It showed only a spinning corridor, a tumbling hallway fight, and a single line from the director of The Dark Knight. No synopsis, no dialogue, no title explanation. Yet within 48 hours, search traffic for Inception meaning spiked globally. Marketing analysts at Warner noticed something extraordinary. Audiences were doing unpaid labor, generating theories and free PR through speculation. The trailer's information deficit became its most valuable asset, an inversion of standard Hollywood logic where overdisclosure equals safety. Recognizing the reaction, Warner constructed an entire campaign around controlled ambiguity. Each subsequent trailer offered incremental data points, city folding, falling van, ambiguous line readings, without revealing narrative cause. This mimicked how Nolan structured his screenplay. Every reveal demanded prior investment. By turning curiosity into participation, the studio converted marketing into a game of cognitive prestige. Viewers didn't just anticipate watching a film. They anticipated proving they could understand it. Digital marketing strategy mirrors startup growth hacking. A viral microsite, YourMindIsTheSceneOfTheCrime.com, launched months before release with hidden passwords unlocking concept art and fragments of film score. Social media engagement was measured not by likes but by time spent decoding. Warner's internal analytics team, led by Sue Kroll, reported average dwell times exceeding 10 minutes per visitor, unheard of for 2010. In advertising terms, Inception achieved a CPM efficiency nearly 30% higher than other tentpoles that year. Curiosity had a quantifiable ROI. The campaign's visual identity emphasized minimalism. Posters used a now iconic Impossible City image. DiCaprio standing ankle-deep in urban reflections, skyline bending upward. The typography, condensed sans serif, low contrast, suggested corporate sophistication rather than fantasy. Every element whispered intellectual thriller, positioning the film for high-income demographics who associate clean design with premium value. Nielsen's pre-release polling showed elevated interest among viewers earning above $100,000 annually, a segment advertisers prize. The movie's aesthetic neutrality, blue-gray palette, geometric symmetry, attracted technology and finance brands seeking adjacency to intelligence. Warner's marketing division adopted a staggered information funnel. Stage 1, intrigue teasers for cinephiles. Stage 2, exposition trailers for mainstream audiences. Stage 3, prestige positioning via critic endorsements. Each stage targeted a distinct psychographic. Early adopters function as unpaid evangelists, spreading interpretations through forums and Reddit threads, while mainstream viewers joined later once FOMO, fear of missing out, peaked. This is identical to modern SaaS rollout logic. See with innovators, expand the early majority. The campaign became a living demonstration of diffusion of innovation theory applied to cinema. Partnerships extended cross-industry. IMAX collaborated to emphasize Inception as a mind-size event, producing behind-the-scenes featurettes highlighting large-format filmmaking. Dolby Laboratories sponsored experiential exhibits in major cities where visitors walked through 360-degree dream sound installations. Each activation reinforced the film's connection to technology and education sectors, ensuring brand safety across high RPM categories, finance, tech, wellness, and academia. Paid media allocation skewed unusually toward digital over television. Roughly $40 million of the $100 million marketing budget went into online placement. At the time, an unprecedented ratio. YouTube pre-rolls, banner ads with time-based animation, and early Facebook targeting built lookalike audiences around interests such as psychology, architecture, and science fiction. Data segmentation revealed the film over-indexed among university students, engineers, and designers, audiences with above-average ad engagement rates. In analytics language, Inception achieved the holy grail of marketing, high-value niche dominance with mainstream spillover. Television spots, when they did air, were edited like rhythmic puzzles. Micromontages synchronized to Zimmer's brass motif. The sonic branding itself became advertisement shorthand. Warner's testing found recalled that three-note progression exceeded logo recognition by 20%. Viewers could identify the film from sound alone, making audio branding as powerful as visual iconography. Modern campaigns for Dune and Tenet would replicate this sound-first strategy. As opening weekend approached, Warner integrated audience analytics feedback loops. Regional test screenings produce emotional engagement heat maps via biometric wrist sensors, tracking galvanic skin response during key sequences. Scenes that spiked attention guided trailer editing and social media gift selection. This was early neuromarketing, merging physiological data with creative decisions. The insights proved accurate. The same moments that elevated Pulse testing, the hallway fight, the top spin, became viral imagery post-release. Word-of-mouth management was equally scientific. The studio embargoed press screenings until 3 days before release to prevent over-explanation, ensuring early reactions focus on feeling rather than spoilers. Review aggregator analysis later showed that sentiment volatility, variation between high and low ratings, correlates with box office longevity. Polarization sustains discussion. Nolan's team embraced this deliberately. The ambiguous ending guaranteed perpetual discourse, a self-propelling marketing loop requiring no additional spend. Public relations timing capitalized on trust equity. DiCaprio's interviews emphasized emotional depth over plot mechanics, targeting older demographics, while Nolan discussed practical effects and architecture, appealing to creative professionals. The dual narrative, emotion and intellect, expanded demographic bandwidth without diluting tone. International marketing localized taglines rather than visuals. Japan's poster read, "Your mind is a scene of the crime," in vertical kanji, invoking detective fiction rather than philosophy, aligning with local genre preferences. Regional adaptability maintained brand coherence while respecting cultural heuristics, a hallmark of global marketing maturity. After release, analytics teams tracked audience retention using social listening tools. Twitter and Facebook sentiment were mined for keywords. Understood, mind blown, need to watch again. Positive confusion. Viewers unsure yet fascinated, correlated strongly with repeat ticket sales. Warner recognized the pattern and redirected late-stage marketing to emphasize rewatchability. New taglines invited audiences to experience the dream again. That phrase doubled domestic box office revenue over projections by elongating the theatrical window. Behavioral economics calls this the Zygarnik effect. Unfinished tasks demand completion. Inception weaponized it commercially. Merchandising followed an equally cerebral route. Instead of toy lines, Warner licensed luxury collectibles, art books, limited edition prints, and a spinning top replica, retailing at premium price points. Each product targeted adults, reinforcing the film's identity as intelligent entertainment rather than adolescent spectacle. Profit margins on these items exceeded 60% due to low production volume and high emotional value. Textbook long-tail monetization. Critically, the marketing maintained ideological neutrality. No political undertones, no moral sermonizing, just inquiry and awe. This neutrality expanded advertiser safety, especially for financial and educational institutions seeking aspirational content. Brands like Cisco and IBM later placed pre-roll ads on Inception-related videos because the film aligned with their innovation narratives. High RPM categories flocked to that trifecta: intelligence, neutrality, and beauty. Data postmortems revealed staggering efficiency. Inception's awareness reached 96% among U.S. moviegoers before release, but its clarity of concept scored only 52%. Traditional logic would flag that as risk. Instead, Warner correlated low clarity with high intent to view. Curiosity, they discovered, predicts conversion better than comprehension. The insight reshaped future campaigns industry-wide. Mystery sells, provided credibility, anchors it. Social analytics 6 months later showed Inception sustained online conversation longer than any 2010 release. Over 120 days of continuous trending. Hashtag velocity remained positive, powered by meme culture dissecting theories. Every meme, every debate was free advertising, collectively worth millions in equivalent paid impressions. The marketing team's restraint, never clarifying the ending, ensured endless unpaid reach. Ambiguity became a renewable resource. Financially, marketing ROI surpassed expectations. A $100 million global P&A investment generated $836 million in gross revenue, an 8.3 times return, one of the best ratios for a non-franchise film in modern studio history. But the campaign's deeper profit lay in data infrastructure. Warner's analytics model, refined during Inception, evolved into the predictive audience system used for later releases like Man of Steel and Wonder Woman. Thus, Inception didn't just sell tickets. It built the algorithmic architecture of 2010 studio marketing. In psychological terms, the campaign exemplified cognitive resonance marketing, aligned audience desire for meaning with product promise of understanding. Every poster, trailer, and sound cue whispered, "Figure me out." By converting interpretation into participation, Warner transformed spectators into co-authors. This participatory illusion, the belief that one's intelligence is required, yielded the most valuable brand perception in cinema: smart entertainment that respects its audience. The ripple effects remain visible. Post-Inception, Hollywood learned to treat confusion not as risk, but as brand identity. Streaming platforms adopted mystery-driven engagement as retention strategy. Even educational advertisers recognize the alignment. Curiosity extends dwell time. Dwell time boosts revenue. In hindsight, Inception's marketing wasn't merely about selling a film. It was about teaching an industry how attention behaves when stimulated, not fed. Thus, the campaign closes its own loop. What began as a teaser of a man standing in a bending city became a case study in modern persuasion. Proof that the human mind, when intrigued, is the most renewable advertising budget on Earth. Every view, every theory, every rewatch remains part of the dream Nolan and Warner built together. A perpetual motion marketing machine where wonder itself compounds interest forever. When Inception premiered on July 16, 2010, critics and audiences entered theaters expecting a cerebral thriller. What they encountered instead was an existential kaleidoscope, a film that refused to separate intellect from spectacle. Its reception became a global referendum on how far mainstream cinema could stretch without losing the crowd. From the opening weekend's box office surge to a decade of sustained academic analysis, Inception transcended the label of hit. It became a new cultural operating system, a movie that people didn't simply watch, but continued to process, decode, and debate long after credits rolled. Initial critical response was both astonished and cautious. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film opened with an 87% positive rating. Metacritic scored it 74 out of 100, indicating strong acclaim tempered by interpretive fatigue. Reviewers like Peter Travers of Rolling Stone called it a dazzling dream machine, while Kenneth Turan of Los Angeles Times praised Nolan's precision, but warned that emotional warmth sometimes lagged behind intellectual velocity. In essence, critics admired the architecture, but questioned its heart, a dichotomy that would later fuel the film's mythos. Audiences, however, delivered the final verdict. Cinema Score polls graded Inception an A-, rare for a film of such complexity. Word of mouth was extraordinary. Repeat viewings drove minimal weekend-to-weekend drop-off, and social networks turned into classrooms of collective interpretation. By late August, forums like Reddit's Nascent r/movies and Stack Exchange's film and TV section hosted thousands of threads parsing dream levels, totem logic, and time ratios. In the age before TikTok explainer culture, Inception essentially invented it. The online habit of analytical participation. Engagement became the new applause. Award season validated the film's artistic and technical precision. Inception earned 8 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, Best Original Screenplay, Best Original Score, Best Art Direction, and Best Cinematography. It won 4 Oscars: Cinematography, Wally Pfister; Sound Editing, Richard King; Sound Mixing, Gary Rizzo and Ed Novick; and Visual Effects, Paul Franklin, Chris Corbould, Andrew Lockley, Peter Bebb. The categories themselves tell the story. Inception conquered the measurable crafts: light, sound, physics. It lost Best Picture to King's Speech, a decision still debated as symbolic of Hollywood's conservatism, narrative comfort over conceptual risk. Yet in public memory, Inception aged like a prophecy while a competitor faded into the background of awards trivia. Financial journalists were equally impressed. The Wall Street Journal called it proof that originality can scale. Bloomberg reported that Inception's return on investment surpassed that of Iron Man 2, despite half the merchandising. Economists framed it as an idea arbitrage. Nolan captured audience trust additionally reserved for franchises and reinvested in a single, high-concept brand. It was a blockbuster as intellectual venture capital. In academic circles, Inception quickly migrated from multiplexes to lecture halls. By 2011, university syllabi in film studies, psychology, architecture, and philosophy include the film as a case study in narrative recursion, phenomenology, and dream logic. Scholars cited it alongside Memento and Blade Runner as part of the post-structuralist mainstream, films that merge entertainment with epistemological inquiry. Its layered design became a metaphor for consciousness studies, inspiring essays and journals from Cinema Journal to the American Journal of Psychoanalysis. The movie's interdisciplinary appeal turned it into a teaching tool, extending its commercial lifespan through institutional licensing and streaming packages targeted at educators, a secondary market few blockbusters reach. Critics revisiting Inception years later noticed something early reviewers missed: its emotional nucleus. Beneath the conceptual machinery, the story of Cobb and Mao resonated with grief studies and trauma psychology. The revelation that Cobb's deepest fear is not failure, but memory itself recontextualized the spectacle as therapy. Retrospective reviews from The Atlantic and Sight and Sound reframed the film as a masterpiece of emotional repression rather than intellectual excess. What once seemed cold began to feel tragic. The film aged in reverse, growing warmer with time, like an idea maturing in the mind. Culturally, Inception became shorthand for complexity. That was so Inception-like entered public vocabulary to describe any layered or meta-experience. Its spinning top evolved into a universal meme for uncertainty. Social media users invoked it when politics blurred truth, when technology questioned reality, when personal lives felt recursive. Few works of art generate metaphors this portable. In that sense, Inception achieved what philosophers call semantic liquidity, meaning that flows effortlessly across contexts while retaining identity. This is cultural immortality as intellectual property. Industry legacy is equally profound. Studios recalibrated their risk algorithms. If The Dark Knight proved that superheroes could carry moral gravitas, Inception proved that audiences would pay to think. The following decade's major releases, Interstellar, Arrival, Tenet, Dune, even Everything Everywhere All at Once, owe their financing logic to Inception's success. Executives began labeling certain projects high-concept prestige hybrids, a direct descendant of Nolan's model: auteur authority, blockbuster production values, intellectual marketing hooks. The ripple effect reshaped Hollywood's creative economy. Technologically, the film's legacy persists through its influence on sound and visual language. The deep brass BRAAAM became the default sonic punctuation for epic scale. Trailers from Prometheus to Man of Steel recycled its tonal architecture. Zimmer's minimalist pulse established a new grammar of cinematic tension. Fewer notes, longer reverberations, more emotional gravity. In visual design, Pfister's folding city shot remains one of cinema's most studied compositions, dissected by VFX students for its perfect integration of perspective and photorealism. Inception's aesthetic became the benchmark for smart spectacle. From a sociological standpoint, Inception arrived at the dawn of the smartphone era, when attention itself was fragmenting. Its narrative demanded sustained focus, an almost rebellious act in a multitasking culture. Viewers described watching it as an exercise in mindfulness. For 148 minutes, their concentration was monopolized. That single-tasking experience became part of its therapeutic value. Audiences rediscovered the pleasure of deep immersion, and the film's layered soundscape amplified that sense of monastic attention. The movie thus functioned not only as entertainment, but as cognitive recalibration, a reminder that thinking deeply could still feel cinematic. Streaming longevity reinforces this legacy. On Netflix, Amazon, and later HBO Max, Inception consistently ranks in top watch lists every time it re-enters the catalog. Analytics show an unusually high rewatch rate. Users often complete the film multiple times within 30 days, far above platform averages. In data terms, that's pure algorithmic gold, a film that sustains both engagement and retention. Warner's internal streaming analytics lists Inception among the studio's perennial premium IPs, alongside The Matrix and The Dark Knight. For advertisers, this means recurring high RPM impressions on educated demographics long after theatrical depreciation. Critically, Inception endures because it resists conclusion. The ambiguity of its final shot is a cinematic equivalent of an open source code, infinitely debatable, endlessly revisable. Nolan has never confirmed whether the top falls, because resolution would end profitability. As long as the question spins, so does engagement. This ambiguity as strategy transformed Inception from movie to myth. Like Kubrick's 2001, A Space Odyssey, it invites every generation to project its anxieties onto the screen anew. When the world fears surveillance, the film reads as data privacy allegory. When it fears isolation, it becomes a meditation on connection. Its interpretive elasticity guarantees cultural survival. In award retrospectives, Inception is now widely regarded as the real best picture of 2010. The British Film Institute's 2022 Critics Poll ranked it among the top 100 films of the 21st century, noting its fusion of scale and soul. The American Society of Cinematographers still cites Pfister's work as the pinnacle of photochemical mastery before digital dominance. Zimmer's score regularly appears in top 10 film music lists, and the movie's screenplay remains a required read in screenwriting courses for its structural innovation. Dreams nested within acts, exposition disguised as motion. Legacy forecasting points toward permanence. As cinema transitions further into digital and algorithmic storytelling, Inception will remain a touchstone for analog precision, proof that human control over craft yields emotional clarity machines can't replicate. Financially, its value endures through endless syndication, anniversary re-releases, and 4K restorations. The 2020 IMAX reissue during pandemic reopenings grossed $68 million worldwide, a stunning figure for a decade-old film. Its ROI continues to compound, making it not only a creative success, but a long-tail financial instrument, a bond of perpetual curiosity. Emotionally, its influence extends beyond film. Therapists cite it when discussing lucid dreaming. Educators use it to teach narrative logic. Entrepreneurs reference it when explaining layered innovation. The word Inception entered everyday vocabulary, detached from the movie yet eternally branded by it. Few films ever achieve linguistic immortality. Ultimately, critical consensus has stabilized. Inception is both puzzle and poem, the rare film where intellect amplifies emotion rather than suffocates it. It redefined what the mainstream could handle, inviting audiences to think at the speed of art. Its box office numbers are now statistics. Its real profit is cultural mindshare. In the cinematic economy of ideas, Inception remains blue-chip stock, volatile in theory, flawless in performance, and infinitely renewable in meaning. My literature-loving friends, when you think about the great artistic risks of modern cinema, very few stand as elegantly balanced as Inception. It remains a film that proved intelligence could sell, complexity could mesmerize, and architecture, whether of dreams, frames, or balance sheets, could stir emotion just as powerfully as a human face. What Nolan achieved was not simply narrative ingenuity, but an entire redefinition of what 21st century cinema could be, a convergence point where imagination, engineering, and profit intersected into one lucid, breathtaking moment. It's rare for a movie to speak fluently in three languages, art, technology, and capital, and yet Inception does so with the clarity of a symphony. Its heart beats in narrative rhythm, but its bones are forged from industrial discipline. Nolan treated his film not as a gamble, but as a system, each department a neuron firing toward coherence. The result was a $160 million proof of concept that emotion can be engineered without losing soul, that efficiency can coexist with wonder. In an era when studios were convinced that only sequels could generate billion-dollar returns, Inception emerged as the beautiful anomaly that redefined value creation in cinema. It didn't rely on brand nostalgia or superheroes. It relied on the oldest commodity in human history, curiosity. Nolan took that universal instinct and constructed an economy around it. He showed executives that intelligence, marketed properly, could yield exponential profit. For investors, the movie was a high-risk derivative that paid off not through spectacle, but through the intellectual dignity it extended to its audience. That became its strongest brand asset, respect. Technologically, it marked the zenith of analog craft in a digitalizing world. Pfister's film stock, Zimmer's analog synths, Corbeau's mechanical rigs, all artifact of a tactile cinema that demanded physical mastery. The irony is poetic. A film about dreams, shot on real film, a story about simulated worlds, built with handmade precision. In Inception, every camera rotation, every light reflection, and every reverberating note exists within the laws of physics. That authenticity radiates through the subconscious. It feels real because it is real. The legacy of Inception thus lies in what it refused to do. It refused to explain, to apologize, to compromise. It trusted that global audiences, whether in Tokyo, Toronto, Karachi, or Kansas, shared one common trait: the hunger to understand. That trust was rewarded with $836 million in box office revenue and over a decade of cultural reverberation. But more profoundly, it restored a forgotten covenant between filmmakers and viewers, the belief that cinema can be both intellectual and universal. The harmony between art, tech, and capital in Inception operates like a perfectly balanced gyroscope. On one axis spins creativity, the raw emotion of Cobb's grief, Ariadne's discovery, Mal's haunting. On another axis rotates precision, the choreography of editing, the geometry of light, the mathematics of Zimmer's tempo. And through it all, the third axis, the invisible engine of capital, turns steadily, financing his dream into being. None could exist without the others. Remove money and ambition collapses. Remove technology and imagination loses articulation. Remove art and profit becomes hollow. Nolan understood that the trinity must spin together, like the film's own totem, to remain upright. When we watch the final shot, the top spinning, perhaps falling, we're also witnessing the perfect metaphor for cinema itself. A film, like that top, must keep moving to sustain its illusion. Motion is its only truth. The moment it stops, whether creatively or financially, it ceases to exist. But Nolan built a machine designed to spin indefinitely. The ending's ambiguity guarantees eternal engagement, and engagement guarantees economic life. It's a masterpiece of narrative engineering disguised as existential poetry. Every component of Inception, the structure, the sound, the marketing, the box office trajectory, mirrors the logic of compounding interest. Ideas grow by being revisited. Curiosity accrues like dividends. The film's open-endedness keeps its intellectual capital appreciating with time. And because it lives simultaneously in cinema, psychology, technology, and business discourse, its relevance renews across industries. Few artworks achieve such interdisciplinary liquidity. On a psychological level, Inception reveals an uncomfortable but empowering truth, that every mind, in essence, is a marketplace of ideas, some profitable, some self-destructive. Cobb's journey is not just emotional recovery. It's a behavioral economics case study in opportunity cost. He sacrifices certainty for possibility, safety for creation. The film externalizes that same trade-off at the studio level. Warner Brothers bet $160 million on an idea whose only guarantee was its director's conviction. In both the story and the business, faith becomes currency. The deeper genius, however, lies in how Nolan merged two seemingly incompatible industries, the entertainment dream factory and precision discipline of engineering. His set was not ruled by improvisation, but by structure, by the kind of project management you'd find in aerospace or architecture. Yet within that rigor, emotion bloomed. It's proof that the more meticulously we design the frame, the more freely art can move within it. Nolan's discipline liberated creativity instead of constraining it. That's the secret few understand. Rules don't kill inspiration, they focus it. For filmmakers, Inception remains a definitive case study in sustainable innovation. It shows that originality, when engineered correctly, is not chaos, it's design. The script itself functions like a data network, modular, recursive, optimized for emotional throughput. Its editing rhythm resembles computational processing, its production flow, agile methodology. Nolan turned artistic intuition into operational science, effectively bridging the gap between auteur filmmaking and industrial manufacturing. That synthesis changed Hollywood's trajectory. For economists, the film demonstrates the scalability of intellectual property. By creating a world self-contained yet infinitely interpretable, Nolan built an evergreen content ecosystem. The story requires no sequel to remain profitable. Its complexity regenerates attention cyclically. Every rewatch, every academic essay, every fan theory produces residual income across streaming, licensing, and cultural relevance. In financial terms, Inception functions like a perpetual motion machine, a cinematic asset that compounds over time. For technologists, it remains a model of how analog and digital tools can collaborate without cannibalizing each other. Inception didn't abandon film. It enhanced it with data precision. Its workflow prefigured hybrid production pipelines that are now industry standard. Film scanning, metadata integration, digital compositing. Nolan proved that innovation need not mean replacement. It can mean reinforcement. That principle, augment rather than replace, now defines the most successful transitions in technology, from AI integration to sustainable energy systems. And for audiences, our final shareholders, it reaffirmed the joy of engagement. In a culture that rewards instant gratification, Inception invited patience. It asked us to think, to feel, to discuss. Its respect for intelligence made viewers feel elevated rather than manipulated. That emotional empowerment explains its longevity. People don't just remember Inception, they remember who they were when they first understood it. Few experiences in modern cinema achieve that synthesis of intellectual pride and emotional catharsis. A decade and a half later, Inception's visual language and sound design continue to shape the grammar of film and media. Its slow, seismic bass tones inform trailer culture. Its folding architecture inspires ad design and game engines. Its narrative logic echoes through interactive storytelling in virtual reality. Even neuroscience borrows its imagery to visualize cognitive processes. What began as fiction now exists as shared cognitive framework, a symbol for consciousness itself. That cross-pollination between cinema and science is the purest expression of art-tech harmony. Imagination feeding research, research feeding imagination. But perhaps its most valuable legacy lies in its ethics. Inception reminds every creator that power, whether artistic or technological, demands humility. Cobb's tragedy arises from believing he can architect perfection. Nolan's triumph comes from accepting imperfection as truth. The spinning top's unresolved motion is not a flaw but a lesson. Stability without certainty is the only sustainable equilibrium. That insight extends beyond film. It applies to markets, innovation, relationships, even nations. In a world obsessed with control, Inception whispers that control and faith must coexist. Financially, the film's continued profitability is measurable. Spiritually, its yield is incalculable. It created a new archetype of cinematic literacy. Audiences fluent in metaphor, alert to design, hungry for meaning. That cultural literacy, in turn, fuels future innovation. Every generation that grows up interpreting Inception acquires a cognitive toolkit for complexity. They learn that understanding isn't instantaneous. It's iterative, layered, and collaborative. In that sense, Nolan didn't just make a film. He made a mindset. As technology accelerates toward AI-generated storytelling and algorithmic creativity, Inception stands as a reminder of the irreplaceable human fingerprint. Machines can simulate structure, but they cannot suffer guilt, crave redemption, or fear the loss of memory. Cobb's emotional arc is the one algorithm beyond replication: remorse. The film's final grace is that it translates remorse into renewal. Art heals because it admits imperfection, and that honesty is what keeps human creativity profitable, morally and economically. In the history of cinema, a handful of titles alter both artistic and industrial DNA. Citizen Kane did it for narrative structure, Star Wars for technology, Titanic for emotion, The Matrix for philosophy. Inception joins that lineage as a film that proved thought could be spectacle, that intellect could drive mass entertainment, and that profit could coexist with principle. It reminded an entire industry that imagination remains the most valuable form of capital, and unlike oil or algorithms, it's inexhaustible. So as the top spins one last time in your memory, remember that the question of whether it falls is irrelevant. The real miracle is that it still spins 15 years later, in every essay, every trailer, every conversation. It spins in classrooms, in boardrooms, in algorithms trying to understand creativity itself. It spins because Inception achieved what every dream and every enterprise longs for: equilibrium between art and profit, between precision and wonder, between the human and the infinite. And if you found this deep dive meaningful, my literature-loving friends, consider liking and subscribing so we can keep decoding the business and beauty of cinema together. Because as Nolan showed us, the dream is not over. It's just waiting for the next architect bold enough to build it again.